that officers only use lethal force as a last resort, and new reporting requirements about the use of excessive force by law enforcement officers. On a state level, my colleague in New Jersey, State Attorney General Graywall, recently took action to amend.
And there you have President Biden walking out with the South Korean president. We are watching live here on NewsNOW from Fox for this bilateral meeting press conference.
Hello, everyone. Please be seated. Today, I've been honored to welcome to the White House President Moon, and I got an opportunity to spend some private time with him as well as with our delegations. It's only the second head of state to visit and the White House since I've been president, and it's been a real joy. It's a reflection of how much we value the 70-year alliance with the Republic of Korea and how essential we know the relations is to the United States, the future of the Indo-Pacific region, and quite frankly to the world. Today has been particularly special because this afternoon, in addition to our bilateral meetings, President Moon participated in a ceremony right in this room that awarding the Medal of Honor to a veteran of the Korean War, a true American hero, Colonel Ralph Puckett, Jr. And I want to thank you again, Mr. President, for joining us. It was special. I don't know that there's ever been an award of the Medal of Honor with the head of state of the country where the award was won. It meant a great deal to me and to the family and to our country. And but today not only been an affirmation of our shared history of sacrifice that binds the Republic of Korea and the United States together, it's a commitment to expanding cooperation and shaping our shared future in accordance with our democratic values that have made our nation strong and agile and highly competitive in the 21st century's economies. The Republic of Korea and the United States are both nations built on innovation, and we must both meet the challenges facing us today and look to what is possible for tomorrow. Our partnership is grounded on our ironclad commitment to shared security. Our alliance has long been the linchpin of peace, security, prosperity, and the region growing more prominent and us being together. I was grateful that our two nations were able to quickly conclude a new cost-sharing agreement for forces in Korea in March, which will benefit both our peoples. And I thank again the President for that agreement. Today, we made important progress on a range of issues. We spoke about the shared approach to the Democratic People's Republic in Korea and continuing threat of the DPRK's nuclear and missile programs. My team consulted closely with President Moon's team throughout the process of our DPRK review, and we both are deeply concerned about the situation. Our two nations also share a willingness to engage diplomatically with the DPRK to take pragmatic steps that will reduce tensions as we move toward our ultimate goal of denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. Today, I affirm to President Moon that the United States will proceed in close consultation with the Republic of Korea in our strategy and our approach. And to help drive all these efforts, I'm pleased to announce that Ambassador Sung Kim, a career diplomat and with deep policy expertise, will serve as the U.S. Special Envoy for the DPRK. Ambassador Kim, you're here somewhere today. Stand up, will you? Thank you for being on with us. Thank you for taking on this important role. We appreciate it very much. The U.S.-ROK partnership also extends beyond the goals of the peninsula. They address issues of regional and global concern through stronger cooperation with partners in the region, including the ASEAN, the Quad, and trilateral cooperation with Japan. The multilateral cooperation is particularly important to coordinate an approach to the situation that exists in Burma as we work to pressure the junta to restore democracy for the people of Burma. and to address issues critical to regional stability, such as maintaining freedom of navigation in the South China Sea and preserving peace and stability across the Taiwan Straits. Today, we also discussed ways that the Republic of Korea and the United States will work together to address the challenges of our time, beginning with our efforts to end the COVID-19 pandemic globally. We agreed to establish a comprehensive vaccine partnership to expand the manufacture of vaccines that have been approved safe and effective, and we can scale up global vaccine supplies. We'll strengthen our ability to fight the pandemic and respond to future biological threats. When it comes to fighting climate change, the Republic of Korea and the United States are committed to making ambitious 2030 targets aligned with the effort to achieve net zero greenhouse gas emissions no later than 2050. And we're going to work together both to mobilize climate finance for developing countries and to make sure that international financing is aligned to promote our climate goals. We also talked about how to harness our nation's technological advantages to ensure the Republic of Korea and the United States are cooperating to shape emerging technologies around our shared value system. This includes everything from strengthening our cybersecurity to deepening our cooperation to build out an open, secure G5 network, or 5G network, I should say. I'm talking about the G5. It's another organization. I'm thinking organization, Mr. President, to secure the 5G networks. And I'm particularly gratified that so many leading South Korean companies see the benefits of investing in the United States, including this morning's announcement of more than $25 billion in new investments from Samsung, Hyundai, SK, and LG. I understand the executives of those companies here. Would you please stand up? Thank you, thank you, thank you, and I think we'll do great work together. These new investments are going to create thousands of good-paying jobs and jobs of the future right here in the United States. And they're going to help fortify and secure the supply chains for things like semiconductors and electric batteries. I know, as I said, that the CEOs made the effort not only to do this, but to be here today, and again, I thank them for being here. I thank you for making the investments in our future and yours. Finally, I want to note that yesterday I had the honor of signing into law the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act to help Americans of Asian descent from having to live in fear just walking down the streets of the United States. Quite frankly, I've been ashamed at the way some Americans have responded. And there's a long history in this country of contributions of Asian Americans being overlooked, forgotten, and ignored. And I affirm to President Moon today what I said yesterday, that we're committing and we're going to stay committed to stopping the hatred based on this bias. I promise you. Our people share a long history. Our soldiers have fought alongside one another. Our scientists work side by side in both our countries. Our students study together, share ideas, and seed new opportunities for future collaboration. And our people-to-people and cultural connections are only growing. And K-pop fans are universal. Now, I can tell those who laughed know what I'm talking about. Well, anyway, I'll get back to that later. Anyway. The Korean actress took home an Oscar for supporting actors this year, following up on the 4 Oscar wins for the movie Parasite last year. And so our two countries, our two nations have the tools and the deep connections that we need to make even stronger alliances and stronger cooperation. And I want to thank you again for the meetings today, Mr. President, particularly our long private meeting. I appreciated that a great deal. And I'm looking forward to working closely with you and your team as we expand and strengthen our efforts to shape the future together. And I mean that literally, to shape the future together. So thank you. Mr. President.
Honorable President Biden, Madam Vice President, I extend my deepest gratitude to you for your special hospitality and welcome. Today, leaders and delegates of Korea and the United States met each other's eye and had a dialogue. For the peoples of our two nations, this will give them hope for recovery from COVID-19, as well as a meaningful gift for celebrating the 139th anniversary of our diplomatic relations. President Biden and I had an awarding ceremony for the Medal of Honor to the Korean War veteran, one-on-one meeting, as well as an expanded summit. For many hours together, we've had a very frank dialogue like old friends. As regards the promotion of democracy, inclusive growth, the strengthening of the middle class, climate change response, as well as many other areas, two of us were able to see for ourselves that we had common interests and commitments. In particular, we reaffirmed the strength of the Iraq-U.S. alliance and confirmed the common vision for developing it into an even stronger one. During my visit this time, the trust that has been built up between President Biden and I will foster a deeper friendship between our two peoples and lay a firm foundation that will undergird the sustainable development of the Iraq-U.S. alliance, and I say this with confidence. The most urgent common task that our two countries must undertake is achieving complete denuclearization and permanent peace on the Korean Peninsula. Recently, the Biden administration concluded its DPRK policy review, building on past agreements, including the Singapore Joint Statement, while taking a calibrated and practical approach to seeking diplomacy with North Korea, is indeed a welcome direction of the Biden administration's North Korea policy. During the course of the review, our two countries closely coordinated with each other in lockstep, which I note with much appreciation. Moreover, I welcome President Biden's appointment of Ambassador Sung Kim as Special Representative for North Korea policy. This reflects the firm commitment of the U.S. for exploring diplomacy and its readiness for dialogue with North Korea. I have high expectations, all the more as such a man of high caliber with expertise in the Korean Peninsula issues has been appointed. President Biden and I discussed the dialogues based on commitments made between the two Koreas and between the U.S. and North Korea are essential for making a peaceful Korean Peninsula. This is the belief that we were able to reaffirm. Moreover, President Biden also expressed his support for the inter-Korean dialogue and cooperation. Under close cooperation with the U.S., we will work to facilitate progress in inter-Korean relations so as to achieve a virtuous cycle with U.S. DPRK dialogue. Moving forward as well, Korea and the United States will continue close communication while exploring our North Korea approach through dialogue and diplomacy. On that, I expect a positive response from North Korea. When strong security is firmly in place, we can preserve and make peace. Two of us agreed to further reinforce our combined defense posture and reaffirmed our commitment to a conditions-based transition of wartime operational control. It is also with pleasure that I deliver the news on the termination of the revised missile guidelines. The signing of ROK-U.S. Special Measures Agreement on burden sharing in the early days of the Biden administration displays for the world the robustness of our alliance as a symbolic and practical measure.
Today at the summit, President Biden and I decided to expand our cooperation in new emerging areas that are relevant for the changing times and landscape. First, to surmount COVID-19, our most urgent task, we pledge to pool our strength together. America's advanced technologies and Korea's production capabilities will be married to establish a comprehensive CORUS global vaccine partnership. Collaboration between our two countries will boost global vaccine supply and contribute to accelerating a complete ending of COVID-19. Through the global health security agenda, which aims to enhance infectious disease response capability, multilateral cooperation will be pursued as well. Under this broad framework of vaccine cooperation, illustrating the robust ROK-U.S. alliance, an important announcement was made. President Biden pledged to supply vaccines to Korean servicemen. I thank you, Mr. President. This announcement of the U.S., I believe, extends the ROK-U.S. alliance to the field of health in a meaningful measure. Second, from semiconductors, EV batteries, pharmaceuticals to other cutting-edge manufacturing technology sectors, in an effort to build secure supply chains, we committed to work in close concert. Digital transformation is accelerating, and the areas of cutting-edge emerging technologies are gaining greater importance. Korea and the U.S., in response to a post-COVID-19 era, plan to strengthen our cooperation in civil space exploration, 6G, and green energy to secure global competitiveness. Furthermore, to jointly advance into overseas nuclear power plant markets, we decided to bolster our partnership. Third, in a bid to address climate change, we will further solidify coordination between our two countries. Our two nations are already spearheading global cooperation in climate change response. Last April, the U.S. hosted the Leaders Summit on Climate successfully. Korea, for its part, in next week, is hosting P4G's Seoul Summit, once again trying to build the international community's collective will for climate change response. President Biden will participate in the P4G Seoul Summit next week virtually. I welcome his participation, which will certainly help us catalyze the international community to come together. President Biden and I participated in the ceremony for awarding a Medal of Honor to a Korean War veteran, Colonel Ralph Perkett Jr. Based on the ROK-U.S. alliance rooted in the noble sacrifices of our heroes, our two nations will usher in a new future together without a doubt. Today's meetings between President Biden and myself and between the U.S. and Korea will mark another milestone for bilateral cooperation towards a new era. President Biden has extended such warm hospitality, and I express my deepest gratitude once again. I look forward to our frequent communication and continued close consultation. Last but not least, yesterday, Israel and Hamas agreed on a ceasefire, which is indeed a relief. I appreciate President Biden's hard work and leadership in this regard. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, first question, I'm told, is Mary Alice Parker, ABC.
Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate it. What is your message to Democrats who want you to be more confrontational with Israel, and specifically to those that are saying that there should be an end to arms sales? I mean, do you recognize that there's been a shift, an evolution in your party, Mr. President, in the last 20 years on this issue? And I have a question for President Moon, but I can wait, or I can.
There is no shift in my commitment to the security of Israel, period. No shift, not at all. But I tell you what there is a shift in. The shift is that we still need a two-state solution. It is the only answer, And what I'm convinced of is that we can now move, as I did even before where I was able to negotiate, before the ceasefire was negotiated, that I made it clear that I spoke with President Abbas. We're going to make sure that we are going to provide for security in the West Bank, and we renewed the security commitment, as well as economic commitment to the people on the West Bank. I also indicated to the Israelis that I thought it was very important that they stop in Jerusalem this intercommunal fighting that is by extremes on both sides. It has to end. It has to end. And I'm prepared to put together, and I'm going to attempt to put together, a major package with other nations who share our view to rebuild the homes, and without re-engaging, without providing Hamas the opportunity to rebuild our weapon systems, rebuild the Gaza, rebuild Gaza. And they need the help, and I'm committed to get that done. And so I don't, and I think that, my party still supports Israel. Let's get something straight here. Until the region says unequivocally they acknowledge the right of Israel to exist as an independent Jewish state, there will be no peace.
Can I ask a question to President Moon? Any assurances behind the scenes to Taiwan, and if President Biden has pushed you to take a tougher stance when it comes to China's posture towards Taiwan?
Good luck.
Well, fortunately, there wasn't such pressure. But as for peace and stability in Taiwan Strait, we agreed how important that region is, especially considering the special characteristics between China and Taiwan. We decided to work more closely on this matter going forward. So we have a question from a Korean journalist over here. Yes, two from the left. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. I'm Kang from Yonhap News. I have a question to both of the presidents here. As was mentioned by the former journalist, I understand that the Israel and Palestine issues is very important, but North Korea's nuclear issues is equally important. On your to-do list, what's the number that's given to the North Korean nuclear issue on your priority list, Mr. President Biden? And also to President Moon, in terms of your roadmap for resolving the nuclear issue in North Korea. I want to understand whether your time schedule actually matches and is equal to one another in terms of resolving the nuclear issues on the Korean Peninsula. So to begin, under the new Biden administration, the DPRK policy review has been completed in a rather fast period of time. That means that the Biden administration puts a priority on its North Korea policy among its diplomatic tasks. And also in terms of reviewing its DPRK policy, there was a very close coordination as well as consultations between the United States and the Republic of Korea. So the principle of the negotiations towards North Korea has already been announced by the U.S. government. A very calibrated, practical, gradual, step-by-step manner, and very flexible. That is the approach that the current administration is aiming to adopt. So that is the common understanding that we have with the United States, and that we're going to continue to work forward on this. And in terms of the timeline for the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, there aren't any differences in terms of how we think about this. No differences in terms of our opinions.
I agree with what the President just said. Our goal is and remains complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. We want to make practical progress and increase security in the United States for the United States and our allies. You know, we closely studied what others have tried and what worked and what hasn't worked. And, you know, we're under no illusions how difficult this is, none whatsoever. And the past 4 administrations have not achieved the objective. It's an incredibly difficult objective. As we move forward, we're going to stay in very close coordination with our friends and our partners in the region, including President Moon. And we fully recognize that this is about our collective security in the Indo-Pacific region. And so, but total denuclearization is our objective and remains so. Oh, I get to the next question, huh? I'd like to ask the press a question, if I may. Nancy Cordes, CBS.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I have one question about North Korea and one question about Israel.
We've changed this one question thing, haven't we?
2 foreign policy questions. You have said in the past that you would not meet with Kim Jong-un, the leader of North Korea, without certain preconditions.
Yes.
What are those preconditions, and do you believe he would ever be able to meet them?
Well, what I never do is I never make a judgment what a man or woman is going to do or not do based on what they said. We'll see. if he made any commitment, and I would meet with him, and if there was a commitment on which we met. And the commitment has to be that there's discussion about his nuclear arsenal. And if it's merely a means by which, how do we de-escalate what they're doing? And so if that was the case, I would not meet unless there was some outline made that my Secretary of State and others would have negotiated as to how we would proceed. But what I would not do is I would not do what had been done in the recent past. I would not give him all that he's looking for as national, international recognition as legitimate, and give them what allowed him to move in the direction of appearing to be more, how can I say it, more serious about what he wasn't at all serious about. I'd have to know specifics, but the idea of never meeting with North Korea, I would make sure that my team had met with their counterparts, and I knew exactly what we were meeting on.
And then in the wake of all of your conversations this week, what is your relationship like now with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu? Do you have certain expectations that he will bolster the rights of the Palestinian people in some way? And if so, did you convey that to him in your conversations?
One of the reasons why we were able to get the ceasefire in 11 days, they didn't do what other people have done. I don't talk about what I tell people in private. I don't talk about what we negotiate in private. What I can assure you, though, is that the last time it took 56 days and then 6 months to get a ceasefire. I'm praying this ceasefire will hold. I take Bibi Netanyahu when he gives me his word. I take him at his word. He's never broken his word to me. And but what I've made clear is that it's essential. It's essential that the Palestinians on the West Bank be secured, that Abbas be recognized as the leader of the Palestinian people, which he is. Hamas is a terrorist organization. We recognize that. But that doesn't mean we should not be in Gaza, rebuilding Gaza for all those innocent people who, in fact, have been hurt and have been collateral damage, including loss of homes and a whole range of other things, as well as insisting that Israeli citizens, whether they be Arab or Jew, are treated equally. Israeli citizens, and that's what was going on in Jerusalem, and so that has to come to an end. And the Prime Minister knows my views, and but the commitment that was given was immediately kept. From the very beginning, I told him what our objective was, that there needed to be a ceasefire, and he, in fact, kept his commitment in the time frame in which he said he would do it. Thank you. And by the way, I wasn't the only one that spoke to him. I looked down here, every major player on my team, from Secretary of Defense to Secretary of State, all the way down the line, and our National Security Advisor were in constant contact with their counterparts in Israel, in Egypt, and throughout the Middle East. This was not something that was just done with a casual conversation between myself and Bibi. I have presumptuous of me to say this, Mr. President, but I think I've got a great team. And I spent a lot of time with El-Sisi on the phone in Egypt, and they've done a commendable job of bringing Hamas to the table and getting them to agree to a ceasefire as well. Thank you. Is that it?
Yes. A lady. All ladies do not raise their hands. Do we not have female journalists from Korea? Good afternoon from Korea Herald. My name is Lee Ji-yoon. The Korean people are very curious about vaccines, and they're waiting for the good news regarding vaccine. I understand that you've had a lot of discussions with President Biden regarding vaccine, and I wonder whether you have any good news to deliver to the people of Korea. And has there been any meaningful achievement that you want to go into the details of? Yes. Regarding vaccine cooperation, you can read the joint statement and also the remarks that were issued as press release today. But to emphasize it once again, between the U.S. and Korea, for vaccine cooperation, there will be a comprehensive partnership to be established between our two nations, and there has been an agreement between our two sides on that. The U.S. has the ability to develop vaccines, and Korean companies have the capacity to produce a biomedicine. And we are going to combine those capabilities so that we can boost vaccine supply, so that we can accelerate the rollout of vaccines to the entire world, especially in the Indo-Pacific region. For supplying vaccines to that region, I believe that we'll be able to make a contribution in that regard. And in that process, Korea, in my opinion, will get some help in stabilizing our vaccine supply. And at the same time, for the sake of the ROC-US alliance, President Biden decided to provide vaccines to the servicemen in Korea. As soon as the U.S. is ready, I understand there will be an announcement to be made by the U.S. side.
Just prematurely make that. Now there are 550,000 Korean soldiers, sailors, airmen who work in close contact with American forces in Korea. We'll provide full vaccinations for all 550,000 of those Korean forces engaging with American forces on a regular basis, both for their sake as well as the sake of the American forces. In addition to that, we've talked about the ability to have vaccines produced with our working with, and this is in the offing, working with one of the major vaccine producers in the United States, and where Korea is incredibly sophisticated, and with the help of that particular company will be able to make significant numbers of vaccines for themselves. And lastly, it is my hope and expectation, I cannot commit to it because we don't know for certain, but we think that over the remainder of 2021, we're going to be able to vaccinate every American. We have enough vaccine to vaccinate every American, period, right now. And we're going to be able to do that by the midsummer, and we're going to continue to get more people to engage in seeking the vaccine. I don't believe, I never have believed, that there's a large percentage of Americans who will not take the vaccine. And we're doing very imaginative things, and states are, to get people to show up and have the vaccine. But we believe that between the second half of 2021 and going in through 2022, we could produce as many as another 1 billion doses of vaccine. Because it's not just, and this is what I like about this president, he's not just talking about any more than I'm just talking about the United States or just Korea. He's talking about the Indo-Pacific. He's talking about the world. We, with advanced capabilities, have an obligation to do everything we can to provide for protection of the entire world. I know that is an awfully ambitious proposal, but I think the nations that have that capacity are going to be continuing to work toward getting that done. And so thank you.
Time for one more, Mr. President.
If you're not asking me a mean one like you usually do.
It's something interesting, I think, that has not come up. President Obama says that there is footage and records of objects in the skies, these unidentified aerial phenomenon, and he says we don't know exactly what they are. What do you think that it is?
I would ask him again. Thank you. Come on, Walther, let's go.
So there you have it. President Biden right there with South Korean President Moon. Want to break down just a couple of the big things that came down from this press conference here. Biden saying that the U.S. and South Korea are deeply concerned about the situation with North Korea, announcing a new special envoy. They also agreed to cooperate more fully on vaccine supply. You heard President Moon speaking about that joint statement that was issued from the two of them. Also comments on the Middle East, as that is a major talker this week. Biden saying that there is no shift in his commitment to the security of Israel, saying that he's committed to getting Gaza rebuilt. So that's the very latest coming again from the president and from South Korean President Moon. We'll be talking a little bit about that later, but we want to head into a different story coming out of Minnesota today. Take a look at this. This is the mug shot right here of Kim Potter. Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison taking over the prosecution of former Brooklyn Center police officer Kim Potter for the fatal shooting of Daunte Wright. I'm going to bring in Fox 9's Paul Bloom, who joins us now with details. Paul, thank you so much for being with us per usual here on News Now from Fox. What's the latest?
Yeah, interesting developments today. The Attorney General's office, of course, recently completing the prosecution of Derek Chauvin in the death of George Floyd, getting a conviction on all 3 counts, murder and manslaughter against Derek Chauvin, will now take on the prosecution of Kimberly Potter. The prosecution was initially being handled by a neighboring prosecutor over in Washington County. That is a neighboring county to Hennepin County, under an agreement where deadly police use of force cases would not be handled brought by the prosecutor within this direct jurisdiction, but rather would be handed off to a neighboring jurisdiction. So Pete Orpett, the Washington County attorney, had initially charged Kimberly Potter with second-degree manslaughter, and some in the community, social justice advocates, police watchdogs, and community groups were upset. They thought there should be a murder charge here. They demanded that sort of an independent prosecution agency come in, and that is exactly what happened today with Keith Ellison and the Attorney General's office taking over this case. Now, no promises here, Daytona, that they will indeed up the charges. Certainly they are reviewing the evidence. They are reviewing the charge that Kimberly Potter currently facing, manslaughter too. But again, no promises of a murder count. But at least there is some satisfaction within some corners of the community today that the Attorney General will now make the ultimate decision on what Kimberly Potter faces before her trial, which is now scheduled for December.
And Paul, what's the response that they're getting from Governor Walz speaking out on this, also hearing from some of those county attorneys? Did this come as a surprise? Are they in favor of this? What's the situation there?
Well, it's interesting. The governor spoke, at least there's some written statements out from the governor, the attorney general, the various prosecutors. Apparently this week, the governor actually welcomed Daunte Wright's family. His mom, Katie Wright, has been actively participating in some of the protests around this case. So apparently the governor had them at their house this week. The Wrights thanked the governor for his support. Basically, the situation is here, a lot of people feel like these deadly police use of force cases, it would make a lot of sense for lawyers in the Attorney General's office to handle these decisions, because they're difficult. The county attorneys are dealing with the police, whether it's in their jurisdiction or even a neighboring jurisdiction, each and every day. They rely on police as witnesses to their other cases. So there's just this real feeling in the activist community that why should they be making decisions on whether or not to charge police officers? So this idea that the Attorney General should oversee these cases makes a lot of sense, but currently under state government and statutes, there's no sort of mechanism for the Attorney General to do this. They don't have money in their budget. They don't have a team of lawyers. Remember in the Chauvin case, a couple of those front-facing prosecutors that we got to know were volunteer prosecutors. Those were not attorneys that are on staff at the Attorney General's office. So there's no real mechanism for this thing to happen with each and every case. But clearly there is this movement. I wouldn't be shocked if at the Capitol we start seeing some legislative movement to make this sort of permanent, that any deadly use of force charging decision goes to sort of this third-party entity, the Attorney General, to decide charging.
And Paul, we are hearing already that some changes have been made with the Brooklyn Center Police Department. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so this is actually a measure that passed last weekend in Brooklyn Center. Of course, Kimberly Potter was on duty, 26-year veteran of the police force. She apparently mistook her taser for the gun, the taser for her gun while trying to keep Dante Wright at a traffic stop while he tried to get into his vehicle about a month ago. And basically last weekend, the city council signed off on a reform package. Now, it basically expresses support for several ideas, including having traffic stops made by unarmed members of a new public safety department, not sending out armed officers to mental health calls, not making arrests for low-level felony and misdemeanor type offenses. So really recreating this police department. Now, nothing is official. This was basically a measure to show support, basically laying out what Brooklyn Center hopes to accomplish in the weeks and months ahead. So that city council will have to discuss what this actually looks like. There are some concerns that police groups have that you can't just blow up the system. There are laws and rules in place in Minnesota. So that is an ongoing process. But absolutely, Brooklyn Center has signaled they are ready to basically blow up the way they do policing in Brooklyn Center coming out of the death of Dante Wright. And they now have the framework in place to, if you will, to make some pretty significant changes to that department.
All righty. Thank you so much for breaking it all down for us. Paul, anything else to be noting moving forward here? Anything specific that you're going to be watching or that has come as a surprise to you in this case versus the Derek Chauvin trial?
I just think the big thing will be, does the Attorney General bump this charge up to murder? Right now, second-degree manslaughter. The activist community, the social justice folks that have been fighting in this case want to see the charge of murder. That's really important to them. So we'll see if that develops. And basically, I spoke to one activist today. His point was, at least let a jury decide. Why should this decision be made by one or two people in an office just assessing all of the evidence? Let a jury decide. They took second-degree murder to a jury in Derek Chauvin's case. They got a conviction. Activists want to see the same thing done here. Even if it was a mistake or not, they want a jury of 12 to make that final decision. So they're asking the AG's office for that count of murder to be added against Kimberly Potter.
All right, and we'll be watching the AG's office alongside you, Fox 9's Paul Bloom in Minneapolis with the very latest for us. Thanks, Paul.
You got it. Thanks, Daytona.
And we are going to take a 2-minute commercial break. When we come back, a really interesting story out of Scottsdale, Arizona concerning masks, but this time with parents who showed up to a school board meeting, and eventually the school board meeting had to come to a close. We're going to hear from the school district about that, as well as the police department. That's all coming up here on News Now from Fox. Welcome back to News Now from Fox. I'm Daytona Everett. It's 3:40 here in Phoenix, Arizona, and we have quite a bit of news coming out of Arizona today. Earlier this week, there was a school board meeting, Scottsdale Unified School District holding a meeting there, but it had to come to a close pretty abruptly because parents refused to wear masks. Here's that video from earlier, and then we're going to head into a press conference that's being held as we speak right now.
And it's really disappointing to me that on a night where we had intended to celebrate so much student success, we have had people in this room who have refused to comply with the school district expectations for masks. We've had people who are being recognized this evening. We've had people who have had to leave tonight who are on the agenda to be recognized because they felt uncomfortable because of that choice. We have had our school district security respectfully ask people to move to the overflow room because we knew that there was going to be a crowd this evening and we prepared for it, but people have refused to do so. Because of that, we have made a decision and a recommendation to recess this meeting, and I'll turn it back to President Greenberg.
So you can hear the disapproval from the parents, obviously, out of Scottsdale, again, Scottsdale Unified School District. So as we speak, there is a press conference with the school district as well as local police department, too. We'll listen into that.
Lainey, can we make sure that Jonathan's ready with the live, too? Well, good afternoon, and thank you for coming to Scottsdale Unified School District this afternoon. My name is Scott Menzel, and I'm the superintendent here. I'm pleased to be joined by Chief Jeff Walther from Scottsdale City Police, and we're happy to talk this afternoon about the incidents that took place earlier this week at the Scottsdale Unified School District Governing Board meeting and provide some information with respect to some of the things that have been circulating in our community that people have questions about, and then talk about our next steps. So on Tuesday, May 18th, the Scottsdale Unified School District Board of Education convened for its final meeting while school is still in session. One of the time-honored traditions of this meeting is to celebrate numerous student successes along with recognizing employees, many of whom have been with us 35 and one of them 40 years. It's not uncommon for there to be a large crowd at this final meeting of the school year for the celebration, and many parents and staff join the celebration of our student successes. In the packet, we've actually included information for you to see all of the students that were going to be recognized along with the employees. The packet you have also has information, a letter of support from the Mayor of Scottsdale and the Mayor of Phoenix, along with the statement of support by the Arizona School Board Association. The meeting this week, though, was a little different than what we've had traditionally. In the days leading up to the meeting, we began to receive some information that indicated that there might be more people in attendance, that there were some issues and concerns that were being raised, and they placed a call to action that encouraged individuals to attend in order to confront the governing board. And this is a quote: "Stop the indoctrination of our children, end mask mandates, respect the rights of students and parents, leave the healthcare decisions of students between the parents and their physicians, and full educational transparency." They were not coming to celebrate our student successes, They were not coming to speak to specific agenda items, as was purported in some of the information that was circulating. In fact, none of the topics that they alleged were going to be discussed, critical race theory, mask, or vaccinations, were even on the agenda for Tuesday evening. If you watched the meeting video, you know that numerous requests were made by our governing board president for the individuals who were in the room to put on their mask. Scottsdale Unified has had a mask requirement since the beginning of the school year, and we've indicated to our community that that mask requirement is remaining in place until the end of the school year, which is next Thursday. These requests were met with disrespect, derision, and shouting. The governing board was ready and willing to conduct the meeting, but the chaos that ensued, which we have since learned was incited by at least some non-SUSD community members, was premeditated, and it made it impossible for the Board of Education and the board president to establish decorum. It was at that point that the governing board voted to recess the meeting. Even then, the governing board was still prepared to have conversations. They didn't run away from our parents or constituents. In fact, they remained in the room having civil conversation with people who approached the dais, and in fact, in one case, moved to another location to have a meeting with a group of parents about the Chaparral Light situation. It wasn't until the chief of security really encouraged the governing board members to leave that they vacated the premise. This afternoon, we want to address, as I mentioned, some of the misinformation that's been circulating, and both before the meeting on Tuesday and after, and really address the next steps, and at the end, issue a call for civil discourse in our public conversations as we look to engage in conversations and topics that can often be difficult. So to address some of the issues of concern, first, the mask requirements. It's not a surprise to anyone here that masks have been contentious since they've been required. There have been different conversations about if they're effective or not effective. But in our schools, we had a mask policy that was required by the governor's executive order up until about a month ago when that requirement was removed. However, the Center for Disease Control and the Maricopa County Department of Public Health still recommend that people who are not vaccinated wear masks. Our students, for the most part, are ineligible or have not yet been fully vaccinated. So the district made the decision that through the end of this school year, we would maintain the mask mandate while our students are inside. We also made modifications about a month ago that allowed for a mask option when students were outside for recess or outside for PE. So it's not as though Scottsdale Unified drew a hard line in the sand and said, we're just going to require masks no matter what. We've been making incremental steps towards relaxing the mask requirement and following the guidance of public health officials. That had been communicated clearly with our families. Additionally, Friday, May 14th, we sent communication that indicated to our families that we expect and are planning for an optional use of masks when we start the school year next year. So some have questioned and they wondered, what will Scottsdale Unified be doing? We sent the signal very clearly that our plan is to begin with masks being optional when we return to school in the fall. This is based on a number of factors, including the fact that students 12 and older are already eligible for being vaccinated. We know that there's work on younger age vaccinations. Many of our staff, most of them, have had the opportunity and or been vaccinated. And we've seen in the data that the transmission rate and serious illness is much lower in our younger students. So we announced that plan to our public before the governing board meeting. We also noted that we'll continue to consult with public health officials because none of us can, with confidence, predict what to expect when we return to school in August. The next question that came up was with respect to vaccinations, and there were some rumors that were circulating that the district is mandating our children to be vaccinated. The governing board and the district has not, nor does it intend to mandate COVID-19 vaccines. Never been a part of our conversation. We have encouraged both our staff and students who are eligible to get vaccinated because we have a vested interest in being able to drive down the COVID cases in our community in order to ensure the health and safety of our staff and students when they come to school. We provide information to our families so that they can know where to access the vaccine. But we respect and understand that it's the parents' right to make decisions for themselves and their family. And so our encouragement does not translate into a mandate. So we wanted to clarify that this afternoon. Thirdly, we've heard from many people that Scottsdale Unified School District is supposedly and has supposedly adopted critical race theory. And I want to say very clearly that the governing board has not considered nor has it adopted critical race theory as a part of the district's curriculum. While there are those who continue to make false allegations to the contrary, what Scottsdale Unified School District does support is culturally relevant and responsive teaching practices. This pedagogy is grounded in teachers displaying cultural competence and having the skills to teach in cross-cultural and multicultural settings. Some have also asked whether or not we're teaching the 1619 project as part of the curriculum. And again, the answer is that the governing board has not adopted Project 1619 curriculum, and they've not even had that conversation. However, I want to say that it's important to note that as a district, we teach U.S. history. And that includes the history of slavery, a very ugly chapter in our nation's history. There's some confusion about teaching past aspects of our history that can be interpreted in different ways. And I want to say that the aspirational ideals upon which this country was founded, including those found in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, represent a vision that we should all be striving for. Throughout history, there have been times where we have fallen far short of those ideals as a nation. There are other times when we've risen to the challenges associated with ensuring liberty and justice for all. Scottsdale Unified School District is committed to the dignity and worth of each individual. We are constantly working to ensure that our schools are safe and that we provide welcoming learning environments for our diverse student population. In today's highly politically charged environment, it's important to create the space to engage in thoughtful and reflective dialogue regarding issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion.
All right, we're going to step away from that press conference for just a moment here. We'll get back to it in a moment, play out the full thing for you, because that's what we do here on News Now from Fox. But we want to take you to a live report. After a year full of cancellations, music festivals, and concerts, or lack thereof, they're making a comeback now. Fox's Hunter Davis is live for us in Austin, Texas, the city home to the Austin City Limits Music Festival. Austin, Hunter, it's coming back.
Hey, Daytona, yes, it is on its way, and if ACL is any indication of how people are feeling about festivals, it appears they're pretty eager to get back into those live music venues. This event is 2 weekends long, and it sold out in about 3 hours, which was record-breaking for the event, and it could be a reflection of what a lot of other festivals happening across the country this year could be seeing. I want to show you guys some video, and just a warning, it may look a little weird. You're going to notice crowds of people. What? We haven't seen that in about a year and a half, but that could soon become our new reality as festivals kick back into gear through the summer and the fall. According to Live for Live Music, at least 11 music festivals have been announced as of this week, and another 17 tours have also said the show will go on. And as we inch closer to being in those crowds of people again, the CDC today offering guidance to those who may be struggling with the thought after a year and a half of social distancing.
When people have been following a certain trend for a considerable period of time, that it may take time for them to adjust. So I would not say that that's irrational. I'd say that's understandable.
It's going to be hard to get back to life as we knew it without these masks, and we're going to do so dipping our toe in the water and having everybody move at their own pace.
While some major festivals like South by Southwest here in Austin opted for a virtual route this year, and festivals like Coachella are holding out until 2022. Others like Austin City Limits and Jazz Fest, which is in New Orleans, are scheduled for October. Now, the CDC has yet to issue any specific guidance when it comes to concerts. However, they are still urging people, especially if they're not vaccinated, to stay out of those large gatherings when possible. Daytona?
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit more about that. Vaccines are not going to be required for Austin City Limits then.
Right. Austin City Limits says they will be working with the City of Austin and Austin Public Health to encourage patrons to get vaccinated before attending the festival. However, that doesn't appear to be a requirement at this point. They do say they'll have other safety protocols in place, but they've not been fully transparent this far as to what those protocols will be. That's something we're hoping to get more information on, of course, as we get closer to that October festival.
Yeah. So interesting to hear how everyone is handling it a little bit differently. A lot of these sports venues are requiring vaccines, and if you aren't vaccinated, you have to be 6 feet from people and wear your mask. So a little bit different for every single place. That's why it's so great to have reporters like you out there giving us the details on what to expect. Again, Hunter Davis in Austin, Texas for us. Thanks for being with us. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, Daytona. You too.
And we are going to head back into that press conference in Scottsdale, Arizona. It just wrapped up a few minutes ago, but we want to play it in full for you. Again, just to recap what's going on here, there was a school board meeting that happened earlier this week, and it was absolutely flooded with parents. A lot of parents that were unmasked and refused to put on masks, even though it was a mandate from the school district. So they're rehashing what happened, what exactly happened alongside the police department. You're going to hear from the police department, the Scottsdale Police Department, in just a little bit here.
In today's highly politically charged environment, it's important to create the space to engage in thoughtful and reflective dialogue regarding issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion. We owe that to our students, the next generation of leaders. It is my hope that we will be able to engage more of our community in constructive conversations on these important topics on our path toward ensuring that each student is supported in achieving their full potential. Next, in terms of where do we go from here, I'm honored to be joined today by Scottsdale Police Chief Jeff Walther. SUSD has a long-standing and positive working relationship with the Scottsdale Police Department, and we're grateful for their partnership in providing school resource officers to our middle schools and high schools, and partnering and supporting the districts in so many other ways. Several of the SROs were present Tuesday evening as a result of the information the department received before the meeting and since. That information, which Chief Walther can elaborate on, and a summary of which is included in your packet, has led us to the decision that the May 18th governing board meeting, which was recessed at that meeting, will resume virtually on Monday, May 24th at 6 p.m. as permitted under the open meeting law. It will be done so in order to ensure that its agenda is completed in the business-like atmosphere in which it should be. I want to be clear this afternoon that the district and the governing board want to hear from our parents and our community. Diversity of thought and perspective in a public format that allows questions and concerns to be raised has been a long-standing practice of the governing board at their regular monthly meetings, even though public comment is not required under Arizona statute. Given the increased threats of disruption that Chief Walther outlined earlier this week in a memo to the district, we believe that holding an in-person meeting is not advisable at this time. The district will invite those who submitted public comment cards prior to leaving the meeting on Monday to deliver their comments virtually when the meeting is resumed on Monday, May 24th. There were a total of 23 comment cards submitted that night. In conclusion, this past year has not been an easy year. Scottsdale Unified, along with every other school district in the Valley, across the state and nation, has had to navigate the unknowns and uncertainty related to COVID-19. In March of 2020, when schools in Arizona were sent virtual, none of us could have predicted that we would still be dealing with the pandemic today. As a district, we have worked diligently to provide educational opportunities for our students, both in person and online, in order to ensure that each student was provided an educational option that met their and their families' needs. At the same time, we are charged with ensuring a healthy and safe learning and teaching environment for our students and staff. This meant following guidance from public health officials related to mitigation strategies to slow the spread of the virus. We were fortunate to have a partnership with Honor Health where we were able to get our teachers vaccinated early on. We've been doing everything as a district that we can to ensure that we're able to provide meaningful and high-quality learning opportunities for our students in person. Through all of this, our students and staff have persevered. The disruptions at the May 18th school board meeting undermined the myriad of ways our community, the Scottsdale Unified community, has come together through these challenges. We have been and will continue to be a community with diversity of thought and perspective. It is one of the great things about living in this country and in this community. As we prepare for the final week of school, including final exams, student graduations, and promotions. I hope that we're able to return our focus to the students and ensuring that each one of them gets the support they need to finish the year strong. We want to celebrate the class of 2021 and their opportunity to have in-person graduations this year. And we hope that as we head into the summer break, we can begin with a renewed sense of optimism as we see COVID case numbers continuing to decline, as we see additional positive signs in our community. And we want to invite our community to continue in a dialogue about important issues affecting public education in Scottsdale. With that, I would like to open it up for questions for the police chief and/or for me. And before we take your questions, if you can state your name and which affiliate, that will help us know who you are, and then direct the question.
Chief, this is for you. My name is Spencer Blake. I'm with Channel 3, Channel 5 here.
Yes, sir.
We thought it was interesting that you were here for this meeting with the district as well, and I read the document that you have alongside within your advisement and everything. I'm curious then, on Tuesday, was there anybody who either had to be escorted from the premises or arrested or cited or anything like that? Was there any criminal anything with what happened on Tuesday?
No, we had nobody that we arrested that night, and so nobody that was escorted from the building or nobody that was arrested. We did have some disruption that we were able to quell and to deal with at that time, but nobody was arrested. As for the beginning part of your question, really was why am I here? That is really a 30-year plus collaborative relationship that we have with Scottsdale Unified School District. Dr. Menzel and I have a lot of regular conversation with one another about the public safety element and the safety element within the school system in Scottsdale. And so this was just a natural course of action for us to meet together and answer any questions that you might have related to the media packet.
I have a few questions, so I apologize. Just to clarify.
Name and affiliate.
I'll go with Fox 10.
Thank you.
Just to clarify, to go back, a public meeting is not advisable at this time. I kind of want to break down that quote. So are you worried about these disruptions escalating, and is that where the police come in here? Are there any, I have more questions about the outside groups later, but are there any threats going on? Is that something you can tell us?
Is that for me or Dr. Menzel?
That's for you.
Yeah, so obviously, as you well understand, that I maintain an intelligence unit within the Scottsdale Police Department, and we look at open source media and social media related to Tuesday night's activities. And so there has been a lot of chatter about the meeting and a call to disruption. I'm going to call it a call to disruption because that's what it is. There are a number of groups, some not affiliated at all with the Scottsdale Unified School District, who have put out their call to arms, so to speak, of, hey, let's get as many people to the meeting as we can, let's disrupt the meeting. Some comments about let's make it a Vail-style meeting where we take over the meeting. And so, yeah, there is a lot of chatter out there about disrupting the meeting and disrupting the orderly conduct of the meeting with board members. So that's what Dr. Menzel and I have had the conversations about related to our ability to make sure that the board members are safe, that the parents who come in are safe, that the Scottsdale Unified School District staff are safe, that my staff is safe that are going to be here, and that the people who want to have their voices heard, that they're safe as well. And so when we start to look at that call to arms and that call to disruption for a board meeting, a governing board meeting, that's when we had the conversation, and I presented that information to Dr. Menzel so that he can make an informed decision on which course to take moving forward.
This is for whoever wants to take it. These outside groups, are we talking extremists, QAnon, conspiracy? Can you give us any more information on that?
Yeah, so let me kind of speak to that. The groups that you mentioned tend to be a little bit more of the extremist side of it, and it doesn't always have to be that. It can be small groups of people, individuals who aren't as extreme, who still call for disruption, and so that's really what we're looking at. And if you look at what's been going on around the state and around the country, and we had this on Tuesday night, there are groups and individuals who are now going around from school board meeting to school board meeting to school board meeting in the valley and in the state, with the goal of disrupting, with the goal of, as Dr. Menzel talked about, providing false information or a false narrative to whip the crowd into a frenzy. And those are the groups that we're looking at. I'll even back up, groups and individuals that have made comments of let's get to the meeting, let's get as many people as we can get there, and let's disrupt the meeting.
Last one specifically for you, Dr. Menzel. Look, parents are always gonna, it's a tale as old as time, they're always gonna know better than school, right? Like, that's a back and forth. But the things you rattled off, especially now, you called it politically charged, talking masks, vaccines, critical race theory. If you were to design a playbook for disruption that the officer was just talking about, those would all be that. So I'm just curious to get your feeling. Have you ever seen something like this in your career when it comes to the dynamic here, and how do you feel about that?
Not as elevated as this. So I've seen a number of controversial issues. This is my 19th year as a superintendent, most of which, of course, was in Michigan. And so this is different, I think in large part because of the pandemic. I think people are frustrated, they're tired. There's been all sorts of information. We hear one thing in August, it's something different in October. The story keeps changing, and so people don't even know what to believe. It's also in a political environment that was highly charged around the 2020 election. You have a lot of different moving parts and pieces. As a school district, I think one of our opportunities here is to teach our students and our young people how to have civil conversation around differences of opinion and ideas. How do we separate fact from fiction? How do we vet the data that we're finding on the internet? Just a Google search by itself doesn't mean that the information is accurate. So we have an opportunity as public educators to change the narrative and to create a conversation that can help move us forward. My experience has been that when you sit down and have a discussion with parents who are concerned about any one of the topics you just mentioned, that their concerns are founded in sometimes the fears that they have. They're founded in some of the things that they might have heard that may or may not be true. And when we have an open and honest conversation where we're shouting at each other, we can find some common ground and identify ways to move forward. That's the hope of our district. That's kind of what we're calling for. Part of the reason why we moved forward with our meeting on the 18th, even though we had heard that there were going to be more people there, is I had a belief that in Scottsdale, our parents would have honored the request for masks. We've done it this entire school year, and people have complied. That doesn't mean you have to like it. Personally, I don't like wearing the mask. I'm looking forward to not wearing a mask. But it's one of the things that we had to do in order to ensure the health, safety, and well-being of our students and our staff. And so that was the hope on Tuesday night. We were disappointed that that's not how it ended up, and that we had to recess the meeting. We're moving forward in a way that will allow us to conduct the district's business and then building out plans for the future. I think you had a question next.
Yeah, I wanted to ask...
Name and affiliate, please.
Sorry, Rocio Hernandez from KJBC. Is this Monday meeting, is that going to be the last meeting that the governing board has? Or if not, what do you think is going to be the plan for the future meetings? Are you just going to have to rely on police department to tell you whether it's safe or not to have an in-person gathering or not?
So we have 2 more meetings scheduled in the school year, June 8th and the 22nd. The second meeting of the month is our regular meeting. That's the meeting where we have an open call to the public. We met earlier today to have a conversation about what steps we need to take in order to be able to resume our normal meeting schedule. We've been learning from other districts what they've had to do, and so we believe that we'll be able to implement some strategies to ensure that we don't have that kind of disruption, but we'll be monitoring, and the police department has been a great partner in this. What's happening, what's the chatter on social media so that we can make real-time decisions as we get closer to those meetings.
Can you elaborate on what those strategies are? Yeah.
For me, and Dr. Menzel and I had a lengthy conversation this morning, and I guess the best way to describe about in-person meetings is for those that are watching the press conference, that decision is up to you. This is really about at a board meeting, and I've been in this room at a board meeting and stood at that podium addressing the governing board about different issues related to school resource officers and law enforcement within schools. But really, it comes down to the civil discourse that Dr. Menzel has been talking about. It's really about your civic duty and coming to the podium for redress of issues that you have with the school board or perceptions that you have with the school board. And I know that Dr. Menzel and SUSD and the governing board welcome that, as do I, as your police chief. I welcome that. That's the civics portion of what we all should take part in. It's when there are those people who don't want to participate in civil discourse, that aren't interested in the direction of the board, that they're interested in bludgeoning the board with the cudgel of their own opinion, as opposed to the facts and circumstances that SUSD puts out there. And so really for us, and consultation with Dr. Menzel, and that really is about looking at social media and open source, and do people want to come to the board meeting that are connected to SUSD and have conversation and bring their concerns forward in a positive way that impacts our children in a positive way. So Dr. Menzel and I and his staff and my staff are going to continue to look at that, but we both have every expectation that we'll meet in person and that there'll be productive meetings as we move forward. And so that's really, and I put that accountability piece on our citizens that come forward and want to have productive and civil conversations with the board.
Yes, sir.
Wayne Chesky with the Scottsdale Program. Speaking of that civility and trying to give students an example of having positive dialogue, what has the response been to either yourself or the board since this happened, whether it be emails, things like that? I've seen some of the comments online and they're not pretty, and I assume behind the email that's coming over the same person.
Well, that's an interesting question, Wayne. The emails themselves have tended more positive than negative. The social media comments, I would agree, I've seen them on both sides, and that's a little elevated. There have been some negatives, and the phone calls that have come in have sometimes been negative. And I've had, unfortunately, my assistant and our front desk receptionist, they've had to field a number of very uncivil calls from people in California, New Mexico, and in the state of Arizona, expressing their displeasure with the decisions of our board, which is unfortunate that people from other states feel like they need to weigh in, when in fact what we're trying to do is address the educational needs of our students here in Scottsdale. But in terms of email, it's probably trended 3-to-1 positive in terms of supporting the governing board for holding an expectation for masks in the building while school's in session, and then recessing the meeting so that we didn't allow that to spin out of control.
Wayne, could I add just one thing to that real quick, is that if you look at it, and Dr. Menzel, I just think really hit the nail on the head, is that we have people from outside of the Valley and outside of Scottsdale who are coming in or weighing in on what's going on with the Scottsdale Unified School District and the board meetings, and really taking to task the issues, but in a way that disrupts the actual families from bringing those issues forward as they disrupt a meeting or have a call to action for disruption or removal of board members. And I think that's really the story, is that our own parents who have questions and grievances that they want to address and resolve with the board are unable to do so, or were unable to do so on the 18th due to a lot of outside influence and a lot of presence from people who are not connected to the district, who then don't allow the parents to have their voice.
Yes.
Yes, so I know that we've seen...
Name and affiliate.
Oh, Ashley Paredes with ABC 15.
Thank you, Ashley.
I know we've seen similar disruptions. Vale Unified, also Dysart had a situation as well. Are you guys looking into any connection between those groups? Because I know that they've been actively going, it seems like, from one school district to another school district. And then I have one more question after that.
The short answer is yes. We saw some of the same folks on the 18th at the Scottsdale Unified School District Board meeting that they saw in Peoria, that they saw elsewhere. Some of the same names, same people who are gathering supporters and followers to participate in those meetings that are not connected to Scottsdale. So yes, we are seeing that.
Is this also, from what we've seen, Chief, starting to become more of a community-wide problem? I'm not sure if these groups are also targeting possibly businesses or churches or anybody else that would have, a mask mandate still in place.
I think you will start to see that grow a little bit, but right now what we've seen that is, if you talk about a community spread, ironically with COVID-19, the community spread related to some of that disruption, you see, and you've mentioned at multiple board meetings across the Valley and the state and the country, from Utah to back east. You're seeing that quite a bit. It seems to be kind of a new goal. Let's disrupt a school board meeting. Let's push a particular question or agenda independent of the facts. And Dr. Menzel has put the facts out yet those get misconstrued or changed so that they get a larger number of people. And so really the issue is I think you're going to continue to see this at board meetings, and so it's incumbent upon school districts like Scottsdale Unified, and what Dr. Menzel did today is to put out that information, written information. Here's the truth. Here are the facts. Now, I'm not naive enough to think that that's going to put a stop to groups and the disruptions at school board meetings, because if we're honest with each other, there are a lot of people out there who are interested in making the latest viral video of them and their disruption either at a school board meeting, at a city council meeting. And so that has seemed to really sweep our nation as the thing to do. I want to make my own YouTube video showing disruption and a lack of civil discourse. So sadly, yes, I think you're correct. I think you're going to continue to see this. I think you're going to continue to see this at board meetings. And so as a community, we're all going to have to be responsive to one another to see what can we do to resolve this issue.
Another question here, and then Wayne.
Spencer from AZ Family. And this is for you, Chief. You were talking about how you had seen chatter leading up to the 18th about people saying, hey, let's put it. To clarify, have you seen chatter like that since the 18th about them saying, hey, stick around, let's make sure that we disrupt the next meeting, whenever it is?
Yes. Okay. So we've seen chatter since then. In fact, the chatter after the 18th, the intelligence that we've gathered really picked up after the 18th. Some looked at it as a victory. Hey, we shut down the board meeting, so at the next board meeting, let's get more people there. So our expectation in looking at some of the chatter on there, the early chatter after the 18th, was really about, let's see if we can get between 300 and 1,000-ish people at the next board meeting. And so that's some of the public safety concern that I shared with Dr. Menzel.
Wayne?
Thanks. Following up on that, there's not a lot of focus on a lot of these are outside groups with no connection to Scottsdale. But I've heard concerns from several parents that many of these groups were invited by Scottsdale parents. They're specifically asked to be here to do something of that nature. Have you seen evidence of that? And how do you address that type of issue where they're not just showing up on their own, they are being invited?
I have not seen that. I was sifting through some of the intelligence data. I haven't heard yet. I'm not saying that that's not true, but I haven't heard yet that these outside groups were invited by local parents.
Did you have a question back here?
Yeah. 12 News. Question real quick. I know you guys have been talking about chatter on the websites and stuff like that. Will you guys prepare for the future? And if so, and if something happens, what will be the charge of this for people that start disturbing, boards, meetings, and stuff like that?
Well, we hope it doesn't come to that. That's really the reason for today, is to put out the right information, to have conversation, to get good questions from the press corps, and just to really have that conversation. But yes, if we move forward with in-person meetings again, which I'm sure Dr. Menzel will, and there's disruptions to the point where the meeting has to be canceled, or there are people who are so out of control that they really commit the crime of disorderly conduct, then those are the things that we'll address at that time.
Yes, sir.
Fox 10 News. You mentioned the word chatter. You mentioned you've gotten your emails haven't been that nice. Have there been any direct threats in your investigation as far as searching the social media? Have there been any certain threats?
No. The postings really are about, let's get as many people there as we can, and let's disrupt the meetings. I think everybody has gotten smart enough now that they're not going to throw out a direct threat of let's do this or let's do that. It's really, let's just be disruptive. Let's end any conversation on civil discourse. Let's get rid of masks. Let's do this, that, and the other. And so I think they're savvy enough to not run afoul of that.
And we're not seeing direct threats either, but we have received some pretty nasty emails. People wishing AIDS on our board members and their families, and wishing ill will in some ways that are pretty disgusting. And so that's hard. My governing board volunteers to do this work because they care about the students of Scottsdale Unified School District. And yet they are subject to this kind of language and response that goes beyond the pale in some respects in terms of civil discourse about differences of opinion. Yes, sir.
Last question for me. Is there any way of knowing if any of those threats came from actual parents and students in Scottsdale Unified?
We do many times. We can check to see if they're in our system. So we can tell some cases they're from our school system. In some, they've actually identified, I live in the great state of Tennessee where we know how to do this better. And then there are some that we're not quite certain. We don't see them in our system, so we don't know where they're coming from.
So would you say, probably a hypothetical, but do you think a majority of parents, by any stretch, agree with what happened the other day?
From what I'm hearing from our parents, I don't think that's a majority. I think there are parents that have concerns about any number of things, but most of our parents in Scottsdale, while they feel strongly about whatever the issue might be, they also believe in having respectful dialogue about those issues. What I heard was a lot of people who were embarrassed and said, this does not respect the Scottsdale that I live in and love. So that's my sense, is that that did not reflect something that most parents felt was a positive reflection on our community. Yes, Ashley.
Yeah, just wondering if you're working with other school districts in regards to, looking into these types of situations, or Chief, you're working with other police departments, because we've seen it, become a wider thing where this is happening at a couple different areas.
So we work very collaboratively with other agencies in the Valley. I think the issue, though, right now is that this really started to just take off with the issues in Vail and other cities. Where now it's just really started to build, and I think we happen to be kind of on the front end of this, and so we haven't had to reach out to any of our partner agencies yet to really work on the problem. We wanted to address it immediately, as quickly as possible, and then address it with you first.
And we do talk with other school districts as well to find out what they did after the disruption, to find out what strategies we can put in place to ensure that we can proceed with the business of the school district while still engaging our public in meaningful dialogue. Yes, sir.
ABC 15, is there any way to discourage this, like legally? Obviously you can't stop coming to meetings, but is there any way, maybe after the fact, whether that's, you mentioned disorderly conduct, criminal trespass, to just stop this type of behavior, or at least discourage it?
Isn't that like the $20,000 question? Is there a way to discourage that lack of civil discourse? And I think that's a fabulous question, but it's a much broader issue. We used to be able to disagree. We used to be able to have differing opinions, and then with the school board, I have 3 grown children that grew up in the Valley, and yeah, there were times we disagreed with the school board, and we came in and you asked a question very civilly, and you worked those things out through discourse and dialogue, through conversation. And that seems to have changed, at least for a component, a very vocal group, very vocal minority that really wants to get in and disrupt things. And so that's a tough one. We will continue to, with the school district, put out information to dispel some of the information that gets people most upset. Dr. Menzel talked about it already, that people got very upset because of misinformation. And we're living in the era of misinformation. And so I think probably one of the best strategies is to make sure that whatever the issue is, whatever the venue is, whatever the meeting is, that we get out the real information in advance so that people can look at it and digest it, have some questions about it, and then move forward. Because in the absence of information, it just gets made up.
Is it, no matter what information's out there, aren't you just making stuff anyways?
Often.
And honestly, you're going to get yelled at no matter what.
Yes, we're the police department. We often get yelled at for various things and misinformation. Yes.
We expect some of that. That when the chief and I talk, he underscores the right to assemble peaceably, and that's what we ask for. We don't ask people to not come and speak their truth and share what's on their minds. We just ask that people do it respectfully, and we continue to hope that people will be responsive as we move forward. We have another question over here. I saw a hand. Yes.
Hi, Lorraine with the Copper Courier. Chief Walther, jumping off this last question, you had mentioned that this has become kind of a trend across the country, kind of inciting some of these confrontations and filming that and that being kind of a trend. I know, Macs have become kind of a flashpoint here for other underlying issues that some in the community have had, some concerns that they've had. I know masks in particular have been tricky to enforce force, I think, across the state and in Scottsdale as well. But are you concerned that this kind of tension, I know Dr. Menzel was asked a question earlier about whether we've seen this kind of tension escalate in the district before. From a public safety standpoint, are you concerned about these types of tensions translating over to other issues that the community is concerned about? And are you concerned at the level of escalation and or confrontation?
Yeah, I am, and I have been for a while. You know, this is just the latest iteration of the stress and angst and anger boiling over with masks and other issues related to the school district. But we saw that earlier in the pandemic, or especially when we reached our heights back in December and January again, with restaurants and you know, in Scottsdale we have a very large bar and entertainment district and nightclubs, and so what you see is a clash of people who were tired of the pandemic and wanted to get out of their mask and have a good time, and then a segment that said, no, you shouldn't be out of your mask, it's important that you wear that. And so we saw a lot of tensions flare up related to that. So there have been a lot of tensions related to mask issues over the last year or so, and they just seem to move on to and take a life of their own in a different venue each time. And be it a restaurant, be it a bar or nightclub, be it an outdoor venue, or running the green belt with people calling and saying, I saw somebody not wearing a mask. That puts your police departments in a very precarious position when you talk about mask enforcement. Now those masks, as they're starting to come off, it's the other side of the equation, which is we shouldn't be wearing masks anymore, and people are boiling over into those venues as well. And this just happens to be the latest venue. And I asked myself and my staff, what's the next venue? You know, what's the next flashpoint for us related to masks or misinformation that we're going to wind up having to deal with? So for me, it's very important. Dr. Menzel talked about, I am very much I love the Constitution and people's right to assemble peaceably. If you're upset, this is the pulpit to come to and say, I have issues with that. Sometimes we lose sight of that, and I understand that anger has kind of taken over and taken the day, but we still have problems to resolve. Masks are just one small portion of that, and if we can't do that with some reasonable dialogue and conversation, then that does not bode well for the next venue and the venue after that and the issue after that, because at some point we're going to have to talk to each other and resolve this in a calm, cool, and collected way. Otherwise, violence is going to take the day, and you see that across the country. And as we see, even our own numbers, domestic violence for us is up. Aggravated assaults for us are up. Our Part 1, what I call our Part 1 crimes or violent crimes, are up significantly. And so when you look at those things, those are all related. So at some point, we're going to have greater dialogue in this collectively to resolve some of these issues. Otherwise, it's only going to get worse for us.
We have time for one more question.
Yeah, I had one more question. Dr. Menzel, in the spirit of you're talking about combating disinformation around socially critical race theory, which I think has become another contentious issue among some in the community. My last question for you, if I may do a two-parter, has to do with students. Specifically, have you been hearing from students in Scottsdale schools about talking about these controversial issues in the classroom and whether they see that as valuable and if they view this as an issue and as a concern for them? And I was hoping you might be able to send a message to the students who I know you mentioned were set to be honored at the meeting earlier this week, and you had expressed some of the dignity. So yeah, if you could address that and maybe give a message to the students who are now going to be honored virtually, it sounds like, for the district class.
Our students have these conversations regularly in their high schools. They could be a model for how to engage in respectful civil discussion about controversial topics. Anything can be a controversial topic, which is one of the challenges. But our students live in the real world. They are and use social media better than most adults do, and then they're on the cutting edge of what's the latest and greatest iteration. There are good things that happen with that, and there are bad things. But we have opportunities within our school system to have conversations about what we're seeing, what we're hearing, what it means. Our students, because they attend school with a diverse student population, have grown up with an understanding of people from different cultures and backgrounds and social identities. that are different from their own, and they're open to learning in that environment. It creates a very rich and meaningful learning experience. So I really take my hat off to our students. They've navigated this so commendably, and they've come to school, they've worn masks, they've complied. What we saw when we reopened our doors in September and October was just phenomenal. And so when we get to the end of the school year, a year like this, that's a year like any other, we've got Presidential Scholarship Award winners, National Merit Scholarship Award winners. We have more than 100 students who have received the biliteracy seal on their diploma. We've got a number of others that have the art seal. We're so incredibly impressed and proud of the Scottsdale Unified School Districts, the graduating class of 2021, and every student and their family and our staff who have navigated this pandemic together. I don't know that there was a perfect or a right way to do things, but I'll say that as we approach the end of the school year, we've made it. We have 4 more school days, and I just want to applaud all of the people who've been a part of making this school year as successful as it has been. With that, I want to thank you again for coming, and we'll conclude the press conference.
All right, so everyone, we just wanted to show you that in its entirety and really interesting stuff there. This is in response to that school board meeting that happened in Scottsdale, Arizona just on Tuesday night, and it was a huge uproar. The parents essentially shut the whole thing down because they wouldn't wear masks. And there, the police officer from Scottsdale Police and the superintendent official, calling for parents to remain calm and use civil discourse to discuss a lot of these issues, especially with wearing masks. And so, the last day of the school year is, I believe, next Thursday. So it's not going to be that pressing of an issue for much longer, but we'll be continuing to follow that story if any more developments do take place. I'm Andrew Kraft. Thanks for being with us on your Friday afternoon. We'll take a quick commercial break, and then afterward, we're going to go into some coronavirus news. The task force briefing at the White House met today. We'll see what they had to say. We'll see you in 2 minutes. All right, welcome back here to News Now from Fox. Like I said before the break, we do want to show you the White House Coronavirus Task Force briefing. They met today virtually, as you know. It's Dr. Rochelle Walensky at the CDC, Dr. Fauci, and others. And they brought up an interesting push that the Biden administration is doing to incentivize more people to get the vaccine, especially young people. So take a listen.
Walensky will provide an update on the state of the pandemic. Dr. Fauci will provide an update on the latest science. And Dr. Murthy will provide an update on our efforts to build vaccine confidence. Here's how I want to start, though. I want to discuss what some businesses who cater to young people are doing to assist with the vaccination efforts. Scores of businesses and organizations have responded to the president's call to action to volunteer their services and help the American people to get vaccinated. Over the next few weeks, we'll be highlighting a number of outside initiatives to provide incentives for people to get vaccinated. We believe that it's particularly important to reach young people where they are in the effort to get them vaccinated. We do know that in addition to schooling, financial loss, stress levels, the pandemic has also had a negative impact on young people's social lives. Social distancing and dating were always a bit of a challenging combination. So today, dating sites like Bumble, Tinder, Hinge, Match, OkCupid, BLK, Chispa, Plenty of Fish, and Badoo are announcing a series of features to encourage vaccinations and help people with that help people meet people who have that universally attractive quality. They've been vaccinated against COVID-19. These sites cater to over 50 million people in the US and are some of the world's biggest non-gaming apps. Here's one for you. According to one of the sites, OkCupid, people who display their vaccination status are 14% more likely to get a match. We have finally found the one thing that makes us all more attractive, a vaccination. These dating apps will now allow vaccinated people to display badges which show their vaccination status, filter specifically to see only people who are vaccinated, and offer premium content, details of which I cannot get into. But apparently they include things like boosts and super swipes. The apps will also help people locate places to get vaccinated. All right, got through that. Today also happens to be our Digital Day of Action. The White House and others, including Michelle Obama, will be highlighting the vaccines.gov website and 438-829 text line throughout the day. Now, it's been 4 months since President Biden's first full day of office. Things are substantially better than they were 4 months ago, when we were losing thousands of Americans each day and people were waiting weeks or more to get vaccinated, usually not even knowing where or when it would happen. Today, more than 125 million Americans are fully vaccinated. Those Americans who've been vaccinated are at much lower risk and have more of their lives back. They're able to do most things mask-free and with less reason to socially distance. Tens of millions more, adding up to more than 60% of the adult population, are at least partially vaccinated. The impact has been everything we could have hoped for, given the power of vaccines. Across the country, cases of COVID-19, serious illness, and loss of life are all down dramatically from when we arrived. And they can be brought down even further, and the risk of a future wave in your community significantly reduced if we keep up the pace of vaccinations. Many Americans have still not gotten vaccinated. Most of them younger, many of them not opposed to vaccination. They simply haven't prioritized it. It has never been easier. Starting Monday, when you text 438-829, not only will you instantly see where vaccines near you are available, you will also be offered a free ride there and back. More employers are offering paid time off to get vaccinated. And as we discussed today, there are clear benefits to your social life. Most importantly, You'll be protected from a virus which is still racing around the world. I will now hand it over to Dr. Walensky.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm pleased to be back with you today. Let's begin with an overview of the data. Yesterday, CDC reported a little over 27,850 new cases of COVID-19. Our 7-day average is about 27,700 cases per day. This represents yet another decrease of more than 19% from the prior 7-day average, and also marks the second day in a row where our 7-day average is less than 30,000 cases per day. The last time the 7-day average of cases per day was this low was June 18, 2020. The 7-day average of hospital admissions is slightly over 3,400, a decrease of almost 15% from the previous 7-day period, and another positive trend. And the 7-day average of daily deaths has also declined to a new low of 498 per day. At the start of each briefing over the past few weeks, I have shared with you a snapshot of the data, and more recently, the encouraging decreases in cases, hospitalizations, and deaths. As each week passes and as we continue to see progress, these data give me hope. I also know that these snapshots are hard to put into the context after 16 months of reviewing them. In isolation, each data point does not tell the full story of what we are seeing across the country. Today, I'd like to give you a bit of a deeper dive into the data and to share with you ways you can understand the progress your community is making. Each day, CDC, in collaboration with partners across the government, releases a community profile report and updates our county level data on COVID data tracker. When we look at COVID case incidents at the county level, we see major decreases. As I've mentioned at the start of my remarks, we have seen a 20% decrease in the 7-day average of cases across the country. And we have seen some counties across the country have had an even greater decrease, including decreases of 25% or more in just the past week. Each week, we also see a release of an assessment of county level transmission risk, taking into account COVID rates and COVID-19 test characteristics. And we have used this transmission risk for many of our CDC guidance materials, for example, our school guidance. Importantly, over the past month, there has been a steady decline in the number of counties in the United States with a high risk of community transmission. And more counties are moving to low or moderate transmission categories. We now have 307 counties, or 10% of the entire US, in which we would characterize having low transmission. And there are 1,183 counties, or 37% of all US counties, in the moderate transmission category, which we define as less than 50 cases per 100,000 in the last 7 days. Now, if you look at this new slide up, I want to show you 2 maps of our country, one from January and one from this week. CDC uses data on cases and county transmission to help us understand areas across the country where we may have concern for emerging or sustained outbreaks and where things have markedly improved, and also to understand the burden of infection at the local level, because we recognize that these decisions have to be made locally. When we look across the country, our areas of high or moderate burden, indicated by red and pink respectively, are shrinking. And areas with low burden of disease, indicated by light green, are markedly increasing. Many of the areas where previous high and moderate burden are now resolving and are highlighted on blue in this map. The map on the right demonstrates our national landscape, that things are improving, and we are seeing this week after week and with more and more green over time. These data are telling us a story. As more and more people roll up their sleeves and get vaccinated, the number of cases and the level of community risk is decreasing. I want to thank everyone who has done their part to bring us where we are today, with more than 60% of Americans 18 and older having received at least 1 dose and being on their way to full vaccination, and 126.6 million Americans who are fully vaccinated. The progress in these data are so encouraging to me, and I hope encouraging to you. And I know our work here is not done. We still have many more people to get vaccinated. I encourage everyone who is not yet fully vaccinated to visit vaccine.gov and find a location to get your first or second shot. Thank you. I'll now turn things over to Dr. Fauci.
Thank you very much, Dr. Walensky. I'd like to spend the next couple of minutes just underscoring and emphasizing the reasons why Dr. Walensky was able to show you such promising data, and that is the real world effectiveness of the COVID-19 vaccine, and bringing you up to date on some of the data that confirms the things that we've been telling you over the last several press briefings. Next slide. This is an MMWR from the CDC, which is looking both at the Pfizer-BioNTech and the Moderna vaccine among healthcare personnel at 33 sites in the United States. Again, if you look at the effectiveness in the real world setting, again, right at the point that we saw with the clinical trials. Usually real world settings have less of an efficacy than in the trials. As I've mentioned many times, not so here, 94% against symptomatic disease. Next slide. If you look at a very interesting study that came out 2 days ago in the New England Journal of Medicine, looking at the incident of SARS-CoV-2 infection in nursing home residents, in those who were either vaccinated or unvaccinated, we see a very interesting phenomenon. Among the 13,000 residents who were vaccinated, who received 2 doses, there was a 1% infection within 0 to 14 days of the second dose, and practically no infections, namely 0.3% after 14 days. Note that 80% of the cases were asymptomatic among vaccinated individuals, something that we have seen in other situations. Next slide. On the other side of the coin are those in this same study who were unvaccinated. If you look at the infection rate of those individuals within 0 to 14 days after the first clinic, they were 4.3% compared to the very small 1% in the previous slide. And there were 0.3% if you waited more than 42 days. This is a reflection of what is likely a mini version within the nursing home setting of herd immunity. Next slide. And then another multi-state Mayo Clinic health system study where you looked at adenovirus vector, namely the J&J. I've been speaking to you up to now about the mRNAs. So after at least 2 weeks of follow-up, the vaccine effectiveness again was even greater in the United States here than we originally reported with the 72%. Next slide. Again, more data. This was a J&J paper that I showed to this group a few weeks ago, looking at the safety and the efficacy of the single dose Ad26. As you can see, the efficacy was 74% in the United States. But now take a look at this a little bit more closely. Next slide. If you look at the hospitalizations and compare the placebo in red with the J&J in blue, 14 days post-vaccination, you see there's 93% vaccine efficacy. But if you wait at least 28 days post-vaccination, it's 100% with regard to hospitalizations. Next slide. And then when you look at deaths, there were no COVID-19 related deaths in the vaccine group and 5 COVID-related deaths in the placebo group. And on the final slide, what does this tell us? That vaccines protect you, they protect your family, and they interrupt the chain of transmission of the virus. So the bottom line is we're all saying, get vaccinated. Pass it over to you, Dr. Murthy.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Fauci, and it's good to be with all of you again this morning. I'd like today to share some numbers with you concerning people who are vaccinated and unvaccinated. The recent data from the CDC involving a survey of over 14,000 people show that more than 70% of Americans are vaccinated, planning to get vaccinated, or likely to get vaccinated. And while a portion of the unvaccinated population do have questions about the vaccine, and while we are going to continue to mobilize trusted messengers through our COVID-19 community corps to help answer these questions, the truth is that overall vaccine confidence in the country remains high. That is good news. The data continues to point, though, to access barriers being an important additional concern among people who are unvaccinated. There's a recent Kaiser Family Foundation survey, which looked at those who are unvaccinated but who wanted to get vaccinated as soon as possible. What it found was that more than a third of people in this group said that they have not gotten vaccinated because they didn't have enough time due to work hours or other scheduled conflicts, or because they just hadn't gotten around to it. About 7% of people said that they didn't have information about how to get vaccinated. 8% said they weren't sure if they were eligible or had the right documentation. These numbers may seem small, but they actually represent millions of people, and they are crucial to reach with vaccines if you want cases to come down and stay down. Now, when we look at another part of the unvaccinated population, those who do not want to get vaccinated as soon as possible, it turns out here too, access is an issue. Among those who are employed, 28% say that they would be more likely to get vaccinated if they receive time off to receive and recover from the vaccine. Another 20% say they would be more likely if the shot was administered in their workplace. So employers not only have an opportunity to increase vaccination rates, but if you look at one more piece of data, it turns out that they can also help to close the equity gap in vaccinations. This is so important because we've said from the beginning that success is not just determined by how many people we get vaccinated, but by how equitably and fairly we vaccinate our population. And workplaces, it turns out, can play a role in that. Because among the unvaccinated, 64% of Hispanic adults and 55% of Black adults have concerns about missing work to recover from vaccinations, compared to 41% of white adults. And that's why the recently announced tax credits for businesses and nonprofit organizations with fewer than 500 employees are so important, because they provide financial support for businesses providing time off for employees to actually get the vaccine and recover from temporary side effects. We want people to know about this. We want businesses to take advantage of it. This next phase of the vaccination campaign will be driven more than anything by the people and organizations and communities who help to vaccinate their families, their friends, and others in their neighborhoods. It's why we've been saying that addressing access, motivation, and vaccine confidence requires an all-hands-on-deck approach. But thankfully, people all across America are stepping up to meet this moment. Businesses like Joe's Kansas City Barbecue are giving workers time off if they get vaccinated, and the Phoenix Zoo is administering vaccines on site to visitors, volunteers, and employees. Young Invincibles, a young adult advocacy group and a member of our COVID-19 Community Corps, recently launched Don't Miss Out LA, a campaign that trains young people to spread the word about the vaccine on all fronts: peer-to-peer texting, phone banking, social media, QR code stickers placed in popular LA spots, and of course, the good old-fashioned in-person conversation. And Parents Together, another one of our COVID-19 Community Corps members, which is a parent-led and parent-powered organization which provides trusted information to families, they have engaged hundreds of thousands of parents online about their questions about vaccines, any concerns they may have, and stories about their vaccinations. So today, we are asking everyone to help spread the word about getting vaccinated as part of our digital day of action. And we are encouraging communities to visit vaccine.gov, to text their zip code to 438829, which spells GetVax, or to 822-862, which spells vacuna, and you can find available vaccines near you. So please reach out to your family and friends. Please share this with the members of your organization, whether it's your employees or your volunteers. Remind people the vaccine is free of charge. It's now easier to get than ever before. And remind people also that the vaccine remains our single best pathway out of the COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you so much, and I'll turn it back to Andy.
Thank you, Dr. Murthy. Okay, we'll take some questions.
Thanks, Andy, and happy Friday. Let's go to Victoria Knight at Kaiser.
Hey, thanks for taking my question. My question is for Dr. Walensky. Will the CDC be updating their dashboard daily with state-by-state race and ethnicity data? And also, what is the CDC planning to do about the high percentage of missing data on race and ethnicity, which is close to about 40%?
Thank you for that question, Victoria. We have been updating our website. I can't say that it's daily. I believe that it's weekly, and we actually have a new feature just in the last week looking at how we are doing for vaccine distribution in a two-week rolling basis. We are working actively with states, public health and localities to try and get more access to race and ethnicity data, and have actually made some progress in that regard, and we're continuing to do so.
Next question.
Steve Portnoy, CBS.
Hi, thanks for taking my question. All of the data that the doctors have laid out this morning is extremely encouraging, but some people saw the crowd of close to 70 presumably fully vaccinated people in the East Room at the White House yesterday, and some said on social media that the sight made them nervous. So to the doctors, what do you say to those people who may have spent the last 15 months following your advice to strictly avoid crowds, who might not be psychologically ready to do what you now know to be safe if they've been vaccinated? Dr. Fauci, are these lingering fears irrational? And to Dr. Walensky, what does it say about the response to the CDC's communications over the last week if people do continue to have that fear?
Dr. Fauci, do you want to begin?
Well, I would say that fears like that are not irrational. I mean, people, it's understandable when you're used to a certain type of behavior. And then when the science says that you can actually turn around that, as we've said with the recent CDC guidelines that say we can feel comfortable, that if you're fully vaccinated, that you are safe from being infected, be it outdoors or indoors, you can understand that when people have been following a certain trend for a considerable period of time, that it may take time for them to adjust. So I would not say that that's irrational. I'd say that's understandable.
Dr. Walensky.
Thank you. I would echo much of what Dr. Fauci has said. You know, when we released our guidelines and the science said it was safe to do so, we also acknowledge that not everybody is going to feel like it's time to rip off their masks. For 16 months, we've been saying that it's important to wear these masks to protect yourselves. And now what we're saying is it's going to be hard to get back to life as we knew it without these masks. And we're going to do so dipping our toe in the water and having everybody move at their own pace. We specifically have acknowledged that if you are vaccinated, there is no shame, no problem in continuing to wear your mask. And just like it has been hard to have everybody get masks, I think this is going to take some time for us all to get used to.
Great. Next question.
Peter Sullivan, The Hill.
Hi, thanks. I wanted to ask about the vaccine lottery incentive program. Some states have been doing. Ohio, New York, and Maryland all have lotteries or prize money you can be entered in if you vaccinate. I wonder if you kind of think that's a good idea, and have you been talking to states about that? Are you going to encourage more states to have these kind of lottery incentives?
Well, from the data we've seen, they appear to be working. And I think the reason they work is because the vast number of people who are not yet vaccinated are actually not opposed to getting vaccinated. They're just not prioritizing it very high. There are other things going on in their lives. And so things that draw attention to it, like the lotteries in those states you mentioned, are not surprisingly very effective. And so we're enthusiastic. Next question.
Jeremy Diamond, CNN.
Hey, thanks for taking the question. I'm wondering, how do you all anticipate that declining deaths and cases will affect people's decision to get vaccinated, especially for those who are still on the fence? And then secondly, I'm wondering if you guys have an update on the doses that you plan to send abroad, what the timing for that is, and if you've settled on a process for deciding which countries will get doses and how many. Thanks.
So why don't we start with the first question, which is the impact of the improving outlook for the pandemic on people's willingness and interest in getting vaccinated. Dr. Murthy, do you want to start with that?
Sure, thanks, Andy. And Jeremy, I appreciate the question. I think it's a good one. Look, it can be easy to look at the circumstances right now with all of the improvements Dr. Walensky laid out, cases, hospitalizations, deaths, and think we're out of this pandemic. We don't have to get vaccinated or take precautions anymore. But that would not be the right lesson to take. The right a message we believe is that we are seeing improvements because people have in fact gotten vaccinated. And if we continue on this path, get more people vaccinated, we can sustain that decline in cases that we've seen and the decline in deaths and hospitalizations. But if we stop where we are right now, if people do not get fully vaccinated, the millions more out there who still need to, then we will still be at risk potentially for more infections in the future. And we want to protect everybody in our country from this virus. So that's why we will continue to emphasize that we should keep moving forward with vaccinations. Do not let your guard down, but be encouraged and cautiously optimistic that we are absolutely heading in the right direction. We can't take our foot off the accelerator.
Yeah, there's good evidence. People don't feel at risk of dying of the measles, yet they still get their vaccination. So I think we just have a much more continued education for the public to do, and many, many more people will get vaccinated. Jeremy, your other question, which I think you ask frequently, is about the status of doses to other countries. To confirm that we have committed that before the 4th of July, and we are waiting on FDA approval, 80 million doses, which is 13% of all of the doses that have been procured in the US, are going to be sent overseas. That's in addition to the $4 billion commitment that we've led with COVAX. We don't have a status yet on either the FDA approval of the AstraZeneca doses, and nor do we have news to report today about where those doses are going. But I will reiterate something the president said, which is that those decisions are being made on two factors: science and public health, and equity, and no other factors. Next question.
Ring Grappi, USA Today.
Hi, can you talk a little bit about how the dating app initiative came about, and also whether this is a first for the White House to get involved in dating sites?
I suppose I have to take that question, huh? Well,
all you, Andy.
Thanks, everybody. As we were talking about earlier, in all seriousness, people are interested in other things in life besides their vaccine. But the vaccine enables people to get back to the things that they enjoy in life. And, Dr. Murthy's written extensively, in all seriousness, about the concept of loneliness and about social contact and so forth. And so while it is a kind of a funny thing to talk about, the truth of the matter is people do want to get back to their normal lives. They do have questions about making sure that that they can do that safely. And that's great. So we're obviously pleased with that, and the fact that this reaches those many people. I think I applaud the initiative on these companies' parts. I think it's their effort, and I think we had conversations with them. But this is things that they were doing because they saw a need in their audience base. So I think that's the gist of it. Next question.
Tom Christopher.
Sorry, I have trouble with this unmute button. Okay, well, thanks for doing this. And I have a question. I kind of hate to bring this up, but I really feel like I have to. I don't know if you guys saw this viral video from Ricky Schroeder earlier in the week yelling at some poor guy at Costco. But I live in New Jersey, another state that hasn't dropped the mask mandates. And it's been bad all along, but it's gotten even worse since the new vaccination, the guidelines for vaccinated people. People come down here on the weekends and in the summertime, and they scream at our restaurant workers because they have to wear a mask to go from the door to their table. And I'm wondering what you guys have to say about all that. And I mean, I know Governor Phil Murphy says that it's not fair to ask a frontline worker to decide whether or not someone presenting themselves at a business is vaccinated or not. And so, I mean, what do you think about all that? I mean, there's a friend of mine told me that a customer threatened to get her fired because she asked him to wear a mask.
Thanks for the question. Look, the last year and a half has been one of the most intense periods in our lives. People are feeling a lot of stress, and they're feeling, as Dr. Fauci said earlier, very normal feelings adjusted. Let's just treat each other with respect. Next question.
Last question. Let's go to Meg Tyrell at CNBC.
Well, Thanks. I was
So we've just been listening for about the last 30 minutes or so to the White House coronavirus task force briefing from earlier today. Familiar faces to a lot of Americans, the CDC director, Dr. Rochelle Walensky, Dr. Fauci as well, Jeff Zients, the senior COVID advisor. And we're going to stay with COVID because, as you know, since the CDC announced their new mask guidance just last week, many states are now taking the opportunity to announce their full reopening plans. And California is doing that as well. California health officials say today the state has met the health metrics for a complete reopening of the state on June 15th. And we're getting some response right now to this as well. And this is from the Los Angeles Dodgers Twitter account, kind of going into the fact that the stadium will return to full capacity June the 15th in coordination with those health guidelines. But we're going to move a little bit north. We're going to talk to Fox 2's Jesse Gary. He's joining us right now. They are from the Bay Area to discuss all of these reopening plans at the moment. Jesse, this is really great news for a lot of Californians today.
Especially those Californians that own businesses, restaurants, etc., who have been waiting and pleading with state health officials to loosen the restrictions and open things up more and more so they can start seeing the dollar start trickling in. You got to remember, it's been a little bit more than a year since they've been living with restrictions on how many people can go inside. First of all, they stopped people going in altogether, ultimately. But now it's been little by little allowing people back in. And these businesses have been trying to make dollars meet and, cut corners, et cetera, do takeout, whatever they can to keep the doors open. So, yeah, they're pretty happy that June 15th is right around the corner.
And Jesse, you kind of went into it a little bit earlier, but, what can Californians do on June 15th that they couldn't do for well over a year? Is this going to be kind of a day turn? Is it going to be immediate, or will it kind of be gradual, like you were kind of indicating?
Well, first off, June 15th is the date, but it's the date for people who are fully vaccinated, such as moi. So if you have both shots, or you did J&J and you had the one-shot solution, then on June 15th, you can go in and you don't need to wear the mask. You ditch the mask, you stand shoulder to shoulder with your comrades, and there's no problem. However, if you do not have a shot, if you're not vaccinated and you don't have a negative COVID test, that's when you're required to still wear the mask. So that the big mask thing, I think, is what people are really happy about. I talked to one person today who said, it'd be a breath of fresh air, no pun intended. To not be able to have to put on that mask every time you go into a store or into a restaurant. Also, speaking of restaurants, you don't have to worry about I can sit here but not there, or I have to sit closer with my own little group. Once you're vaccinated on the 15th, you just go in and sit down. So people are really kind of happy and looking forward to that. And then you go on to the larger venues, such as indoor concerts. I think it's 5,000 people. You'd have to either be vaccinated or have proof of a negative COVID test. Otherwise, you can't go in. If it's outside, 10,000 people or more, well, then you can, if you're vaccinated or have a negative test, you're cool. But even if you're not vaccinated, you can put on a mask and go in. But that's outside, not inside.
Yeah, just such welcome news for most Californians, because California was one of those states that was really hit hard by the pandemic. The summer is looking to be quite different from last summer, thankfully. Last question for you. Are public health officials still, urging calm? And, could these restrictions that are now loosened, be re-implemented due to rising cases? Did they give any indication of that, or is that kind of too far down the road?
Well, Dr. Galley said they expect that there is going to be another spike in COVID cases. But when that does happen, you're going to have to remember that most people will be vaccinated. I think right now, as it stands, it's 76% of those who are 65 and older have at least one shot so far, working on the second. The reason why it takes a little bit of time is because you have to get people obviously queued up to get the first shot, and then you have that 3-week hiatus in between before you get shot number 2. So it's going to take a little while to get everybody that wants to get vaccinated. through that entire process. But they believe by the time you get into June, July, the summer, I mean, let's face it, it's California, it's always summer, but when you get into the heat of the summer months, you're going to have so many people that are vaccinated, so few people who aren't vaccinated, so many people who've already had the virus. There's really very few vectors for transmission left available for the virus. That's why they say they don't believe that the system will become overwhelmed. We'll have a lot more beds and space in hospitals to treat those who do become infected. So it's not completely gone, but you can start to see that we're moving in that direction where you'll be able to say bye-bye finally to 2020.
Yes, I can feel it definitely, especially hearing from a lot of viewers too, just in our industry that want to see reporters back out in the field, out of their homes, into the studios, like you are right there. So, Fox 2.
Hey, wait a minute
thank
now.
You so much for bringing us
it's not easy working in this living room.
But you have some beautiful
Have a good one.
flowers flanking you in the backdrop.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Have a great weekend, Jesse.
You too.
All right, and that's going to do it for some of the news that we wanted to give you about the coronavirus today. And the light is at the end of the tunnel, shining just a little brighter as the weeks go on and more vaccinations ramp up. So we do want to show you some of these beautiful scenes that we do have around the country at the moment. You can see a beautiful shot right now of the U.S. Capitol. It's about a little after 8 p.m. there on this Friday night. I don't think it's as dark because we do have another shot of the White House, which is much lighter. So something's going on with that camera there. But in the meantime, we do want to take just a quick commercial break. I'm Andrew Kraft. Thanks for being with us on your Friday afternoon. We'll be back in 2 minutes.
And welcome back here to News Now from Fox. I'm Daytona Everett. We want to go out to a story in Orange, California. I'm going to show you some aerial pictures from earlier today. A child has died after he was shot inside of a vehicle that was traveling on the 55 freeway in the city of Orange this morning. Authorities believe the shooting was an apparent road rage incident. But to give us more details on exactly what is going on, I'm going to bring in Fox 11's Christina Gonzalez. Christina, thanks for joining us.
Good afternoon, Daytona. Good afternoon, everybody. Sad news on this afternoon. What happened, it was at rush hour this morning. And if you see the vehicle, you will see that there's actually, you can see where the bullet went in through the back. The child was on a booster seat in the back behind his mother, who was driving, nobody else in the vehicle. And there was some kind of altercation between her vehicle, and they're describing it as a white sedan, maybe a Volkswagen, between the Garden Grove and Chapman. This is a small area. And the person decided, according to CHP, to shoot at her vehicle, possibly not knowing there was even a child in the back. And he hit the kid, and the kid died. They did what he could. Now, a lot of people were very concerned about this, not that they wouldn't be initially, because it's a horrible story, but we have been following a series of, shootings of BB guns and the like up the freeways in this area. We've had at least 50 incidents where people had had their windows shot out, but no injuries. Now, today, investigators are saying this is not related to those incidents. They want to emphasize that. This is not a BB gun to begin with. This is actually a bullet that hit this child, and there was an actual exchange between the people, which they're not telling us about. At this point, they're asking anybody who was driving in the area to look at their dash cam video and see if maybe they caught something without even realizing it. I do know the story has touched so many people. You can see that there's actually flowers and bears and things that people have been leaving here. Many of them, most of them actually, had just heard about the story. And they're just really visibly touched about the whole thing and very, very upset. The mother was not injured. And again, the call is out to try to tell people, check their dash cams if they were driving in the area this morning, because it's the only way. They're looking at their cameras. They've done what they can, but they're really going to need the public's help on this. So that is the latest here. Sad news. Hopefully next time you check in with us, we'll have an arrest and more information. For now, sending it back to you, Daytona.
Hey, Christina, we're showing a little bit of video from earlier today. It looks like some of the officials out there were searching the freeway. Were they looking for shell casings, or can you give us more of an idea of what the investigation has been like today?
Yes, the investigation, what you see, if you're looking at that, that's a grid. It's a grid pattern. And they closed the freeway for hours. It's reopened now, but they closed it. And what they do is they literally take a square area in front of them, and they're looking for shell casings. They're looking for anything that could have, that they could have had. And we don't know that they found any because they haven't told us. That's one thing. The second thing is, if you're here live with us, let me show you. You might be able to see the cameras. That's a traffic camera. And the woman came to rest right beneath that traffic camera. Now, we don't know if that captured anything. They have them here about every mile or so on the freeway. I know they're looking at that video. And you can see right now the speed at which people are traveling. People were traveling slower at about that time in the morning and on this side of the freeway. But again, even if you were coming from the other side, if you have that dash cam, it may have captured something at this point. So they're looking at that. They did the grid. They talked to her. They have been looking for video sources other than their cameras up and down the freeway. So far, like I said, no leads because they're not giving us a vehicle description, which they usually would immediately if they had it. But hopefully they'll be able to get that before the end of the day.
Yeah, Christina, have you heard anything more on press conferences that they're going to hold? When are we going to hear from law enforcement about this case specifically, especially since they're asking for the public's help on trying to identify the suspect?
Yeah, I think at least at this point, we understand that there may be one this afternoon around 5 o'clock. It has not been confirmed. We're waiting for confirmation on that. It depends on whether they have more information to give us. At this point, you know, the young man is dead, the little boy. So the hospital is not talking to us. And we're just letting the family do their grieving. And CHP is trying to gather us more information to give us a better vehicle description. But again, that will depend on what they get from the cameras and from anybody passing something on.
Yeah, a lot of unanswered questions at this time in this story. Well, like you said, haven't heard from the mother quite yet, but we don't know what kind of look she probably got during the shooting here. But I'm sure a lot of drivers spooked out there to be on the freeways. As you mentioned, there's BB gun shootings. They've held press conferences on that. Have you been able to speak to any just drivers in Southern California who maybe are trying to stay at home, to stay away from any of this violence on the freeways, right?
Well, it's interesting because this location where I'm at literally is less than a mile from where the 91 freeway is, and that is the area where you've been having all those pellet shootings from LA County, Orange County, the Inland Empire along the 91. So when we first heard that there had been some kind of shooting, we all thought, oh no, here comes the other one. It was CHP who made it a point to say, no, this is not the same thing. At least that's what they have been saying at this point. Because we have been on them about those pellet shootings. They've been going on for 3 weeks. And it's a matter of time before somebody loses control and starts some kind of horrible chain reaction. So they were already working on that in this area. So then this happens. And while they're emphasizing that this is not related, a lot of people we have talked to, they're taking the streets. They're avoiding the freeway. But a lot of people, I mean, this is the way here in Southern California, we drive 20, 30 miles to go to work, and you got to take the freeway. So, but yeah, a lot of people are avoiding it. I, for one, avoid the 91 these days.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, Fox 11's Christina Gonzalez out there in Orange, California, just hoping that everyone stays safe out there and some questions get answered and the suspect is found, who is obviously hasn't been found yet. So thank you again for reporting for us live. Have a great weekend.
Anytime, Daytona. You too. Bye. Thank you. Bye-bye.
And we're going to step away from what's going on in California right now. We're going to take a quick commercial break here on News Now from Fox. When we come back in just about an hour, we have an event with Representative Matt Gaetz, and he is going to be speaking out here in Arizona. If you're unaware, we're actually located in Phoenix, Arizona. We have hubs across the country. We have a hub in Orlando, Florida, who kind of handles the mornings. We have a hub in Los Angeles, California. So we are across the country here on News Now from Fox. But like we said, a lot more events to get to, some live events as well right here in the Valley. We'll see you in just 2 minutes. And welcome back here to News Now from Fox, a live look at the White House right there. We're going to head into an event coming out of Houston, Texas. The Texas Voters Forward Coalition and the NAACP Houston sending a clear message this week to state legislators regarding bills that disenfranchise what they say disenfranchise voters. So we're going to play out that press conference for you here on News Now from Fox.
Mic test. Get some more on the other side over here, please. Everybody turn your electronic devices off. Make it clear that you are against SB 7. Because if you are in favor of voter equality, SB 7 undermines that premise. And so the way to protect voter equality is to come out against the legislation that undermines the essence of what that means. We need the leadership of the partnership and business leaders across this country and this state and this region and this county and this city to go public against voter suppression by opposing SB 7 specifically. And so we're asking today that you would join the movement that is righteous and just. This is not a political issue. It's a moral issue. It's a civil rights issue. This is Jim Crow legislation being resurrected in 2021. And I don't think any responsible leader wants to be having said that on your watch, Texas became a Jim Crow state again. That on your watch, Mr. President, Mr. Chairman, that on your watch, Houston and Harris County aided Texas in becoming a Jim Crow state. You know, it's amazing that Juneteenth is coming up next month. The month that African Americans celebrate getting the news that we have been freed through the Emancipation Proclamation. And guess what our mantra has to be this Juneteenth? Our mantra this Juneteenth has to be not free yet. Because when the vote is taken away, which is the sacred right in a democracy, it is a fundamental right in a democracy, then freedom is at stake. So we are thankful today for the businesses and the leaders who are already on the right side. We're thankful for those businesses that have taken a stand, American Airlines. We're thankful for businesses like those and others who said we are standing against these bills specifically. And in Texas, the question is, who's going to stand on the right side? And we're asking you to do the same on today. Finally, today, this is not just about business leaders. It's about elected leaders. We expect every elected official Democrat, Republican, white, black, or brown, to stand against voter suppression by opposing these bills. Business leaders, elected leaders, and religious leaders. Because again, it's a moral issue. You cannot devalue our humanity through legislation and then verbally value our humanity through your explanation. What we say has to match what we do. And so we'll be asking faith leaders, business leaders, elected leaders to galvanize citizens in our community to stand against SB 7 very, very, very specifically and to state those positions publicly. Because at some point, voters have to decide who to vote for based on who supports democracy, freedom, and equality. And at some point, consumers have to decide who to shop with based on who supports justice, freedom, and democracy. This movement can end quickly. It will only take a galvanized leadership to say to people in the House and in the Senate, enough is enough. Let's stop with the voter suppression. We're thankful today that we're all here today with citizens from across this county and people coming in from around the state of Texas to stand with us together. We're going to be demonstrating for just a few minutes, but today, before we do, I want to introduce a man who stands on his own moral consciences and convictions, a leader in our city, a businessman, a people person who understands what it means to build bridges and consensus, who gives leadership in this downtown community and throughout the city. A friend and a partner for righteousness and justice. Receive with me the leader of Houston First, Mr. David Misberg.
It's certainly hard to top the eloquence of Reverend Dixon.
And it does look like we lost that shot for just a moment here. We're going to take this time to go out to a quick commercial break here on News Now from Fox. Again, the Texas Voters Forward Coalition meeting, talking about voting rights. I think that we do actually have that. Let me just fast forward on it for just a little bit here. And we do have that back.
Amongst those who've been fighting an uphill battle with a short stick, but staying in the fight with faith, with vigor, and determination. We welcome to the microphone at this time the State Representative Ronald Reynolds.
Well, thank you, Bishop Dixon, and all those who are assembled today. You know, I think much has already been said, but I want to put into context just why we're here. You hear Jim Crow, and a lot of people, especially younger generations, don't really understand the significance of the precious fundamental right that we have to vote. The right to vote is truly one of the most precious, fundamental, and the cornerstone of our democracy. It is what makes America America. It makes America the home of the brave and the land of the free. We believe in life, liberty. You cannot have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness if you don't have the right to vote. And so when people are talking about a historical context in Jim Crow 2.0, you know, our civil rights leaders whose shoulders we all stand on, they didn't march, they didn't fight. Many of them did not die for us to have to relitigate the issue of voter suppression in 2021. You know, there was a time when we expected that you had poll taxes and literacy tests. There was a time when you had to guess, Bishop, how many bubbles in a bar of soap. There was a time when if you were white, or if you were a female, or if you were Hispanic, that you could not vote. Texas was one of the last states that had these laws in place because it wasn't until the Voting Rights Act of 1965 was when really Texans could vote. That was really when African Americans could vote. Thank God for John Lewis, who made good trouble, and all of those other people whose names we may never know. So what are we doing in 2021? Why are we going backwards? Why are we not making voting more accessible? Why are we not talking about, Bishop, online voter registration and same-day registration? Why are we trying to turn back the clock? It is simply perpetuating the big lie. You know, as someone who sat in the past on the elections committee, I know sometimes we pass laws with an intent to discriminate. That's what we did with the voter ID law. Make no bones about it. Texas passed one of the most restrictive voter ID laws. Guess what? That was after the election of 2008 when we elected Barack Obama. So when we came back, we had voter ID. So when Trump lost the election, then all of a sudden there's massive voter fraud. That was all a big lie. It was false. It was even his own Republican judges said that no, this is a frivolous lawsuit. And you had our own Attorney General in Texas, Ken Paxton, travel to other states to try to invalidate their elections. So our own Secretary of State said there was no voter fraud that they could detect in Texas. So this is a solution in search of a problem. And here's what they're intending to do. Make no bones about it. They're intending to suppress the votes of black and brown people, of the disabled. And Bishop, you laid that out. This is un-American. It's unpatriotic. There is no place in Texas for this Jim Crow voter suppression 2.0. And anybody who votes for it is on the wrong side of history. And we appeal to the moral consciousness of the Greater Houston Partnership, all of the businesses. If you're for this or if you don't speak out, your silence is golden. Your silence speaks your complicity in this Jim Crow voter suppression. So you heard the stats. This is going to cost billions of dollars. So if you don't care about democracy and you don't care about the precious right to vote, you should care about our economy. We're going to lose hundreds of thousands of jobs and billions of dollars to our economy if we pass this damn bill. And I'm mad because we shouldn't even be discussing this in Texas. We should be talking about access to affordable health care and jobs and raising the minimum wage. We should be talking about, you know, how are we going to have equal pay for equal work? But why are we talking about this? And so finally, let me just say this. It is not too late, as was recently said. There is a conference committee, and we need to appeal to everybody on the conference committee to not pass this bill. So we don't want to be like Georgia and other states that have already passed it, because if we do, this is going to set Texas backwards. So the only way that this bill passes is if people don't make their voices heard. And I guarantee you, everyone who votes for it, they need to be voted out of office because they don't represent the interests of the majority of the African Americans, Hispanics, disabled, our seniors of this state. And they're only perpetuated the big lie. So thank you, Bishop Dixon. Thank you for all the grassroots leaders, all the pastors, all the civil rights, everybody that's here standing on the right side of history. Let's continue to speak truth to power. Thank you.
Vote them out! 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 Yes, absolutely. And thank you, Representative Reynolds, for the hard work that you do, and thank you for the information. And it is very important that we do understand that it's not too late to do the right thing. It's not too late to do the right thing. At this time, we want to welcome to the microphone Mr. Al Castillo. He is the president of LULAC Council 60, and he's speaking for the state of LULAC as well today. We're grateful for the partnership of LULAC, always with us in the trenches. Whenever we have a fight for justice, we can count on their partnership. And right now, this coalition means more to our now and our not yet than it ever has. Thank you, Al.
Thanks, everyone. Bishop Dixon, thank you for inviting us to this very important activity because on behalf of the state ULAC, Texas, and District 18, District 8 LULAC, and on behalf of LULAC, Historic LULAC Council 60 here in the city, we stand with our brothers and sisters here in the NAACP. And anybody and everybody that doesn't have a voice or can't use it or doesn't know how to use it, we're here to speak up for them. Okay, normally I don't write anything down. But this time I did. So if I may refer to my notes. Yes, sir. I thought long and hard. We've been battling Governor Abbott and his Jim Crow tactics for a few months now. We did author an op-ed that was taken up by the Chronicle. I believe that was in November, and it spoke volumes because I was in the civil rights movement with my parents, who were activists, civil rights activists in the 60s and 70s. And I remember the poll tax. The poll tax. $2. You needed to pay $2 so you could have the opportunity to vote. And on several occasions that I witnessed, my dad was selling the poll tax. The people he was trying to sell it to was, sir, I gotta provide for my family. I can't afford $2 to vote. So my dad said, okay, I'm gonna pay you $2. Now you get to vote. And now you get to buy rice and beans and tortillas for your family. I saw that over and over again. So I'm here to stand with him and my parents and this group here and any group that
All right, we're going to step away from that press conference for just a moment here to bring you some breaking news. This just coming down from the Associated Press. The 2 Bureau of Prisons workers tasked with guarding Jeffrey Epstein the night that he killed himself in a New York jail have admitted that they falsified records, but they will skirt any time behind bars under a deal with prosecutors, federal prosecutors. That's according to authorities. This just coming out. The prison workers, Tova Noel and Michael Thomas, were accused of sleeping and browsing the internet instead of monitoring Epstein the night that he took his own life in August 2019. They were charged with lying on prison records to make it seem as though they had made required checks on Epstein before he was found in his cell on August 10th. New York City's medical examiner ruled Epstein's death a suicide. As part of the deal with prosecutors, they will enter into a deferred prosecution agreement with the Justice Department and will serve no time behind bars. That's according to a letter from federal prosecutors that was filed in court papers today. Noel and Thomas would instead be subjected to supervised release and would be required to complete 100 hours of community service and would be required to fully cooperate with an ongoing probe by the Justice Department's Inspector General. The two have, quote, admitted that they willfully and knowingly completed materially false count and round slips regarding required counts and rounds in the housing unit where Epstein was being held. This is all according to that letter. The deal would need to be approved by a judge, which could come as soon as next week. Prosecutors allege that the 2 prison guards sat at their desks just 15 feet from Epstein's cell, shopped online for furniture and motorcycles, and walked around the unit's common area instead of making required rounds every 30 minutes. That's the requirement. During one 2-hour period, both appeared to have been asleep. That's according to the indictment that was filed against them. And Epstein's death was a major embarrassment for the Federal Bureau of Prisons and highlighted some major security and staffing issues within the agency. It also revealed that the jail was suffering from problems, including chronic staffing shortages that led to mandatory overtime for those guards day after day, and other staff being pressed into service as correctional officers as well. So the very latest coming down in this Jeffrey Epstein case. We'll be keeping our eyes on the investigation there, as we are hearing that this could cut them a deal that avoids jail time. More to come on this story a little bit later, but we are going to go back into that press conference out of Houston, Texas. as we're hearing more and more about voting rights across the country.
I saw that over and over again. So I'm here to stand with him and my parents and this group here and any group that hasn't come forward. I implore the businesses to step up, be vocal, tell them that this is intolerable and it's unpatriotic and it's un-American. Stand your ground, because history is going to judge us all. So I'm just going to read this real quick. Hopefully it'll make sense. The 15th Amendment of the Constitution states, the right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on the account of race, color, or previous condition of servitude. Section 2, Congress shall have the power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. So we're here today for solidarity with you, brother. Yes, so and it's written in the Constitution that this shall not pass.
That's right. That's right.
I'm going to address this adversary, Governor Abbott. Your motivation for these Jim Crow machinations are based on a bag of lies. Yes. You are a perpetrator of a big lie. Yes. And you're a disciple of a big liar. Yes. History will judge you and your administration as unoriginal and myopic. Your devotion to your party rather than the diverse community, your diverse constituency is not what a good governor should do. Right. Voter suppression, voter intimidation, voter disenfranchisement is deplorable and intolerable. Yes. I would suggest that to win elections, your party's idea must be inclusive, fresh, innovative, and forward-thinking. It seems that with no ideas of your own, you have resorted to the past, antiquated thinking that encompasses racism, segregationist, best described as Jim Crow laws. I stand here again with my brothers and sisters to denounce these tactics as un-American. The laws you sanction affect all voters, and I would venture to say that you will see unintended consequences for you and your party in the future. Thank you very much. Thanks again.
Thank you, Al, for that salient statement. Very clear, very direct. The big lie has been exposed. And the big liar who's been telling those lies and raising up disciples need to understand that we won't go back. We won't go back. You know, Houston applauds itself for being the most diverse city in America, if not the world. We all talk about that. Houston's diversity. Houston's diversity. But diversity without inclusivity doesn't mean much. We can't brag on how diverse we are because we didn't create that. But until we can brag on how inclusive we are, then our diversity has no value. And what we're saying is we must appreciate the spirit of inclusivity. And when it comes to voting, all Texans, all Americans should have equal access. And I like what you said, Representative Reynolds. We should be creating new ways to make it easier to vote. I was on a debate and I was asked a question, what was wrong with this? I said, well, here's the issue. Should we not be trying to find new innovative ways to help people to vote? I remember when stores did not open on Sundays, but people wanted more access to shop. I remember when they closed at 6 o'clock, and now they close at 9. And I remember remember when restaurants were closed at 6, but everybody wanted more what? Access. And so we're saying that there's something wrong with keeping a polling place open after 6 or 7 o'clock. That is absolutely asinine in 2020. And so we're saying we're too intelligent to be treated like we're ignorant. We are demanding our rights. I'm so thankful today to have multiple people here. I want to bring to the podium at this time another leader who is instrumental in this fight. His name is Mr. Justin Robinson III. He is the president and CEO of the Houston Area Urban League, and then our executive director of labor is coming. These are leaders speaking truth to power against voter suppression. Justin Robinson.
It's always hard to follow great leaders like LULAC, Bishop Dixon, NAACP, Ron Reynolds, and all of my friends that I see here assembled. But it's good to be amongst friends. It's good to be amongst people of common cause and belief that we are an evolving society, one that is striving to do better. One that, as Bishop Dixon mentioned, we looked at how we did things in the past, be it the restaurant, be it the grocery store. We try to do it better so that it's easier to have access to groceries, easier to have access to food at restaurants. Why are we opposed to being easier to have access to the polls? What's wrong with doing it better? What's wrong with everybody participating? What are we afraid of? What do we have to lose? What do they have to lose? Is that the question? That's the question. So ladies and gentlemen, just as we mobilized and came together and found new ways to express our opinions at the polls, we must continue to fight the good fight. We must not sit back and wait for someone else to say, let's have a bill out there that might help to resolve this problem. Let's wait another 2 years for another leader to come forward and push the clock back forward since it's being pushed backwards now. We are the ones. We are the leaders of today. We are the ones that have to speak and to appeal to the delegates and the disciples of you-know-who. So if we're the ones, ladies and gentlemen, let's rise to the occasion. Let's make sure that Governor Abbott understands he represents all of us. The person that submitted this bill, he has to understand that he represents all of us. And all of us matter. And if in fact we all matter, then you ought to represent the interests of all the people. And with a significant population, like your African American community, like your brown community, like your other communities are saying to you that we have to make sure our voices are heard, and we have to listen. That's our responsibility as elected officials. If you don't want to be an elected official, don't be an elected official. If you think that moving forward in this fashion is the way to do it, then trust me, this body will remind you that elections are won and lost by people who show up at the polls. And we will continue to show up at the polls. And we will remember those who remembered us. And we will remember those who did not. The Urban League stands with you and stood with you for over 100 years and will continue to be on the forefront of the fight to ensure that our voices are heard.
Thank you, Justin Robinson III. We appreciate your leadership and the partnership of the Houston Area Urban League. And we know we'll have the partnership of other branches of the Urban League and the NAACP around the state and around the nation, because we all agree to the fundamental right to freedom and access to voting. At this time, Hani Khalil is here. He is the Executive Director of the Texas Gulf Coast Area Labor Federation. We're glad that he's here. Let's welcome Hani Khalil.
Labor in the house. Labor in the house. Labor in the house.
Good afternoon, brothers and sisters.
I bring you greetings from the 90 unions and 60,000 union members of the Texas Gulf Coast Area Labor Federation, AFL-CIO. Let me recognize my brothers and sisters from the communication workers that are here and the Service Employees International Union. Did I miss anyone else? Iron workers are in the house.
Yes.
All right. So our Federation of Unions mobilizes members and works with community partners to demand a fair shot at better lives for all working families, regardless of the color of our skin, the country of our birth, or our faith. And I'm here today to tell you that the Gulf Coast labor movement stands united in opposition to SB 7. A bill designed by Republicans in the Texas legislature to suppress one of the most crucial tools we have to demand a fair shot at better lives, our vote. Unions believe that all working families deserve fair and unfettered and easy access to the ballot box. And that's because through our votes, we can advance policies that bring opportunity to all working people. A living wage, paid sick leave, health insurance, fully funding our public schools. But that's not what SB 7 does. In fact, it makes it harder to vote, and therefore harder for working people to get a fair shot. And so this voter suppression bill, make no mistake about it, is specifically aimed here in Harris County, where officials ran an unquestionably safe and fair and free election, resulting in historic voter turnout last fall. And despite widespread community opposition from working Texans of all stripes, SB 7 is now being railroaded through the legislative process. Railroaded. It's the worst assault on the right to vote since Jim Crow. And it's being negotiated in back rooms without public input right now. And so what are Republicans doing to justify this? They're throwing out that big lie that voter fraud is what got Biden elected. Well, no, that's not what happened, is it? We got Biden elected. Fair elections got Biden elected. And in fact, voting has been and will continue to be safe and secure for Texans, no matter what Governor Abbott says. I mean, let's be clear then, what's behind this? Who is behind this? SB 7 is being pushed by lawmakers and national special interest groups aligned with former President Trump. It's an attempt to undermine democratic elections. And it's sad to say, but almost every single official in Texas, Republican official in Texas, is part of this wide-ranging effort to assault our democracy. So let's be clear about what their goal is. As our demographics change and we get more organized and American people become more progressive, the far right has decided what? That they can't win. And so they're turning their backs on democracy. They're turning their backs on us. That's what they're doing. They're resorting to spinning all kinds of myths about election fraud. They're whitewashing history. They're actively suppressing the vote. And they're trying to keep voters in progressive urban areas like Houston from turning out to vote and building a better Texas where every Texan gets a fair shot. And they're solidifying alliances, make no mistake. They are building very tight alliances with white supremacists, like those that attacked the Capitol on January 6th. So try to overturn our vote, our election, President Biden. The only thing that can stop this far-right assault on our democracy is us here today, standing in solidarity with our neighbors for weeks and months to come. It's got to be a coalition of working people, black and Latino and Asian and Arab and white, fighting together to defend democracy. There's no question we've got a fight on our hands. I don't think anyone doubts that. But we also know that when we stand together, nothing can stop us. And so today we stand united and we speak in one voice. No to Jim Crow 2.0. 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 Thank you.
Thank you.
so much, Hanny, for that spirited presentation and speech. And we're thankful for labor standing with this movement. It is so important that we're all collectively together and uniting in the fight for freedom, democracy, and justice and fairness at the ballot box. I want to bring at this time the president of the student government of Texas Southern University, because this is a multi-generational army for justice and truth. D'Angelo Carter will come and speak, and after him we're going to have Brother Robert Williams. Come on, D'Angelo.
Thank you so much, Ms. Dixon, for inviting me to be a part of this very monumental movement. Definitely, one thing that I definitely would like to say to Governor Abbott's office: you cannot silence our voices. Yes. You cannot stop us from using our freedom of speech and truly doing what's right and exercising our right to vote. Those that came before us and our ancestors truly fought very long and hard to give us access to have the right to vote. And now, myself, along with my generation, is truly carrying on the tradition and ensuring that everyone has that access to vote, including the Senate bill, that is truly suppressing those. As we have seen in Georgia, we have seen the tremendous work that Georgians have did to truly ensure that not only they flew Georgia blue, but also help to ensure that their President Biden was elected to office and Vice President Kamala Harris. And today, myself along with my peers are truly going to continue that right, to make sure that we will continue to educate our peers, register those to vote, and ensure that our voices will not be silenced. Thank you.
We're grateful for college students across the state who are standing in this movement. And I think the message is pretty clear, Brother Robert, that the movement is growing. And we're representing tens of thousands of people, about hundreds of thousands here, with the group that's standing on this premise here on today. At this time, we're going to ask Brother Robert Williams to come. He's a leader and organizer with the Texas Voters Coalition, Voters Forward Coalition, as well as with the Alliance for a New Justice System, and they are statewide organizations as well. Let's receive Robert Williams. Give it up.
Thank you, Bishop. I am Robert Williams, the founder of the Alliance for a New Justice System. My president, Coretta Brown, is standing next to me, and we lobby and advocate in the Capitol for comprehensive criminal justice reform, but the session's almost over. We got time now. We got time now to address what's happening in the Capitol with these voter suppression bills. First of all, we shouldn't even be here. First of all, we shouldn't even be here. Fighting for the same issues that we battled for 57 years ago. My mother could not vote when I was born. I'm just 63 years old. When I was 4, 5, and 6, my daddy had me in the streets of Austin, Texas, fighting for my mother's right to vote. In 1964 it happened. I was 7 years old. And I'll be damned. Here I am, right back again, fighting for the same rights. But we're here to tell you today that we're not going to stop fighting. If it takes us 50 more years, we're going to keep fighting for the next mother, for the next son, for the next daughter, for the next TSU student. We're going to keep fighting. GHP, why are we here in front of your steps? We call it corporate accountability. We know how many of our people are employed right here. We know how many of our people pour their dollars into the businesses that you say are fair and comprehensive. If they are fair, you need to think about opposing. Look, let me put it this way. We read your statement, GHB. It was nice and pretty. Cute statement. It was a cute statement. We are for fair and just elections. We need you to go further than that, GAP. And we need you to say that you oppose SB 7. We need you to stand strong for the people that you employ. We need you to stand strong for the ones throwing money into your businesses right now. And so we stand with Bishop and the NAACP and Texas Voters Forward and all of the union representatives that are here and all of the other organizations, and we are telling you, we aren't going anywhere.
All right. Oppose SB 7. 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 Oppose SB 7.
This coalition, this Army for Justice and the right to vote, protecting the right to vote, is made up of business leaders, it's made up of elected leaders, social justice leaders and advocates. It's also, and students, but it's also made up of religious leaders, faith leaders. And we're grateful today to have leaders who represent organizations and associations within their respective denominations. Bishop Dexter Bell is here. Bishop Livingston is here. Dr. John Ogletree is here. These leaders are here on behalf of countless others. Bishop Bell, would you come and give us a quick word? Other pastors, Pastor Deckard, those who come stand, representing the ministerial community. Pastor Deckard, where are you? Bishop Livingston, Dr. Ogletree, if you don't mind moving forward.
Let me say thank you, Bishop Dixon, for the invitation. My brothers and sisters, we have a real problem. We will not go back. We're not going to let anyone turn us around. We've come too far to allow anyone, any political agenda, any political party to turn us around. Now here's the simple fix, two things after we can do all we can do and exhaust every remedy to stop this bill from being passed by the state of Texas. I think it's incumbent upon us to make sure in the next elections that we send diverse people to the state capitol that will represent all people of Texas. That's important. It's more important also that we get somebody in the governor's mansion that will veto any legislation that's not for the benefit of the best interest of all Texans. That has to be. And I say it again, we will not let anyone turn us around. To stop now means that Emmett Till, that means that Medgar Evers, that means that others who fought and sweat and died for voting rights died in vain. So we cannot allow anybody, nobody, any person, no party to turn us around. We refuse to go back.
We won't go back. We won't go back. We won't go back. We won't go back. We won't go back. We won't go back. We won't go back. We won't go back. We won't go back. We won't go back. We won't go back. We won't go back. We won't go back.
This is our mantra, and I know Pastor Deckard could speak. I know Bishop Livingston could speak. Was that statement sufficient for the pastor? All right, all right, because they represent different denominations and different associations. Dr. S.J. Gilbert II could not make it physically. We represent the Houston Metropolitan Baptist Ministers Conference. These organizations here today represent thousands of people. Right. And so, in conclusion, and we'll take a question or two from the press if there are questions. In conclusion, we want the Greater Houston Partnership to know that we believe you have the ability to make the difference in the outcome of SB 7.
The question is not the ability. The question is, do you have the will? The question is not, do you have the competence? The question is, do you have the courage? The question is not, do you have the muscle? The question is, do you have the moral fiber? Dr. King said it's always the right time to do what is right. And we're saying to the partnership chair of the board, to the CEO, we work together on other things. We marched, we fought to build Houston. We campaigned to build Minute Maid Park, to pass the referendum. We campaigned to build the Toyota Center. We helped to pass that referendum. But just like we can vote things up, we can vote things down. And we want you to understand that we know how to use our voting power. We've got two things, and three for sure. We got voting power, we know how to use our votes, but we also have buying power. We know how to spend our money. And we also have praying power. And that is a God who's bigger than the GHP. That is a God who sits higher than Governor Abbott. There's a God that's stronger than the lieutenant governor. And for those of you who are fearful of Abbott, and fearful of Dan Patrick, and fearful of a conservative movement, and fearful of Donald Trump, there is a God who's bigger than all of these. He sits high, he looks low, and his eyes are on those who will disregard the poor. And when you turn your power against people who are oppressed, you wake up a God who's too big and too powerful. My grandmama taught me, he's so high you can't get over him. He's so wide you can't get around him. He's so low you can't get under him. You got to know, GHP and bishop leaders of Houston, that if God is who he is, he will not look kindly on leaders who let people suffer the injustice that these bills are perpetrating. Stop with the big lie. Stop with the big lie. Stop with the big lie and go down with SB7. We are all God's children, made in his image and in his likeness. And we'll march, we'll fight, we'll pray, we'll sing, we'll vote, we'll spend until justice comes. Until justice comes. Until justice comes. We won't let Harriet Tubman down. Till justice comes. We won't let Fannie Lou Hamer down. Till justice comes. We won't let Medgar Evers down. Till justice comes. We won't let Martin Luther King down. Till justice comes. All God's children have a right to vote. Yes. Thank you very much. No question from the media. Let's all, those of us who are here, let's take to the sidewalk here in front with your signs so people can see. We're here in a circle. Yes, with our signs. Thank you all very much from the press.
And there you have it, that event out of Houston, Texas today, talking about voting rights. We are going to take a quick commercial break here on News Now from Fox. It is a little after 6:15 here in Phoenix, Arizona. A lot more to be getting to, and we will tell you all of that in just a little bit. See you then. And welcome back here to News Now from Fox. It's almost 6:20 here in Phoenix, Arizona. In just about 10 minutes or so, we're going to be going out to an event with Congressman Matt Gaetz, who has been kind of under fire recently, allegations of sex trafficking with minors. His girlfriend coming out today cooperating with that probe that is underway against him. We'll be giving you a little more background on that, but he is holding a rally out in Mesa, Arizona, where an election audit is underway, which has been long time in the making. Yes, we are still talking about the 2020 election, so sure to be a topic that is brought up during this rally with Representative Matt Gaetz. But until then, we are going to take you out to the press briefing with Press Secretary Jen Psaki. She gets asked a series of questions by reporters. We'll play out just a little bit of that and then take you out to this live event in Mesa.
Look and preparedness efforts. On Tuesday, he will mark the anniversary of the death of George Floyd. We'll have more details on what the plans are for that day soon, maybe later today, maybe later this weekend. On Thursday, the president will travel to Cleveland, Ohio to deliver remarks on the economy. And on Friday, his budget will be released, and he will also travel to Wilmington, where he will remain over the Memorial Day weekend. With that, Darlene, why don't you kick us off?
Thank you. Wanted to start with Israel. Does the president or the White House have any concerns that the extent to which the Israeli Prime Minister continues the war will affect the president's own ability to continue to defend Israel's right to defend itself? I know that's a little circular, but...
You mean domestically here, or?
Yes.
Well, first I would say that the president's set a clear objective from the beginning, which was to end the war, play any role we can ending the war, and bring it to a conclusion as quickly as possible. And at the beginning, that seemed highly unlikely, given there were thousands of rockets falling on Tel Aviv, and the Israelis were on a war footing and preparing for, by many reports, a ground invasion. So I would say what's important to look at and reflect on here is historic precedent and the fact that the conflict in 2014, many more lives were lost. Also, it went on for 51 days. So the president's view is that, and his view from the beginning was that through disciplined, intensive, and quiet campaign of diplomacy, and one where we would lead coordination in the region, we could bring an end to the conflict more quickly than it was intended to be. And it's also important to remember that Hamas is a terrorist organization, that Israel, of course, continues to have the right to defend itself. But what's most important from now forward, in his view, is to contemplate where we go from here, Darlene. And certainly he talked yesterday about replenishing support for the Iron Dome. And our view is that saved hundreds of lives, maybe more than that, given the effectiveness. Also to support through the United Nations continued additional assistance in rebuilding Gaza. We've already, of course, restarted our assistance that was ended in 2018 through UNRWA, through the United States, but we'll work through the UN, and we also will remain engaged deeply with diplomatic conversations with leaders in the region. So, obviously, anyone here domestically will have to make their own decisions, but I would say that it's important to convey what our intention was, what we feel that we feel this was concluded as a result of the president's engagement and frankly discipline from the beginning, much faster than these conflicts have been in the past. Go ahead. Go ahead, Darlene. Go ahead.
We also heard this week a lot of Democrats shifting their tone on Israel. So is it time for the president or the White House or the United States to also perhaps start thinking about shifting the approach?
Shifting,
to Israel?
Shifting in what way?
You had a lot of Democrats who were frustrated that the president didn't call for a ceasefire immediately. That was one thing a lot of people were upset about. So, and the sort of, I don't want to say knee-jerk, but the U.S. position is that Israel has a right to defend itself. And there are a lot of Democrats who, I think, from what we heard them say this week, they don't necessarily buy into that. And so the thinking is there some shift in the approach to Israel?
Well, Darlene, I think the reason I answered it the way I did is because obviously we all shared an objective of bringing an end to the conflict. The president's view and his strategic approach and that of his team was that the best way to do that was not to call out our allies and partners, but was to remain closely coordinated and to work in lockstep, and at the right moment to convey it was time to wind it down. And that's exactly what he did. And now the conflict is concluded in 11 days. And frankly, he resisted calls to take an alternative approach that, in his view, would have had an alternative outcome. So that's why I answered it the way I did. Go ahead. Oh, go ahead.
I have one final question.
Sure.
Yesterday, we had a ceremony here, the bill signing. A large group of lawmakers came. We had the Medal of Honor ceremony today.
We're back.
The meeting with the Kennedy Center honors that we were told President and First Lady had. I've seen handshakes, hugging, kissing.
Yes.
Is the White House open again? Can you talk about some of the considerations that went into these events over the past couple of days? And is this the norm, the new norm, the new norm going forward?
I can confirm we are a warm and fuzzy crew, and we like to hug around here. But we were waiting for that to be allowed by CDC guidelines, which we certainly abide by. So we are, as many organizations and companies are, working to implement these guidelines here at the White House. And so what you've seen over the last couple of days is efforts to do exactly that. And that includes welcoming back and having a full briefing room very soon. It includes having more events with more people, and certainly continuing to open the White House up, the People's House up to the American public. Go ahead.
Thanks. Back to Israel for a moment. One of the other examples I think that would fit into Darlene's question is this pressure from lawmakers over the $735 million pending sale of precision-guided missiles to Israel. I know the president said yesterday he's committed to replenishing the Iron Dome, but is he also committed to making sure that sale goes through?
We have no plans to change our security assistance that we're providing to Israel. But I will say that the president's view is that we need to move forward on a couple of fronts. Certainly supporting the security of Israel is one of them. But another front is rebuilding, playing a constructive role in rebuilding Gaza, providing assistance and funding through the UN efforts to do exactly that, ensuring that it is not Hamas, but is the Palestinian people who benefit from that assistance, and doing that through the UN is, in our view, the best way to do that. It also includes continuing to have engaged diplomacy with leaders in the region, continuing discussions with officials across the Middle East, Egyptians, Israelis, Palestinian leaders, Qataris, others, about how we move forward from here.
And then one on police reform. It looks like this sort of soft Memorial Day deadline is going to slip without legislation being passed. Is the White House losing some confidence in the bipartisan talks that are going on Capitol Hill? And also, how does President Biden plan to address that issue on Tuesday when he speaks about the anniversary of George Floyd's death?
Well, I would say first that the president used the occasion of his joint address, one of the highest profile moments any president has, to speak about, reiterate his view that police reform is long overdue, that the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act is exactly the right forum and bill that could help get that done, rebuild trust in communities. What we've seen from the negotiators, and we've been in close touch with the negotiators as well, is that they still feel there is progress being made. Yes, it's unlikely, as they've conveyed as well, we're going to meet the timeline that the president outlined in his speech, which he did because he felt that it was important to lift it up, to be bold and ambitious in how we're talking about such an important piece of legislation. But we have confidence in the negotiators, and we've seen them convey publicly that they feel the vibes are good and they're continuing to make progress. Go ahead.
Nation, is the president confident that this ceasefire will hold? And if so, can you explain a bit why? Did he receive any kinds of assurances from Prime Minister Netanyahu?
Well, we have strong assurances. Sorry, I don't know why that was a hard word. Let me try again. We have strong assurances from the relevant parties that they are committed to the ceasefire. And obviously, this is something we will be watching extremely closely in the coming days. And I think what's important to note is in the final 24 hours leading up to the ceasefire, obviously the president was deeply engaged before that, but he was especially deeply engaged in that period of time, as were high-level senior officials here. And they were back and forth on the phone between many different parties, the Israelis, the Egyptians who were in touch with Hamas, and others, about the importance of not violating, even pre-violating the ceasefire in the hours leading up to it, as we see did not happen. So we will be in close touch with all parties. We clearly will be watching it, but we do have assurances from the relevant parties that they are committed.
And yesterday, before this was announced, you said you expected Israel to start winding down their operations because they had achieved significant military objectives. So how much of the timing of this do you think is because of the president's diplomatic approach? And how much of this is simply because the Israelis had exhausted much of their targets in Gaza?
Well, I think what's, again, important to remember is to point back to how these conflicts have worked in the past. And we have seen these conflicts last for weeks and weeks, many, many more lives lost. Now, we certainly know there were lives lost in this 11-day conflict. Everyone is a tragedy. But certainly, because of the president's deep engagement, his long relationships, the fact that he set a clear objective from the beginning that we were going to put out the noise and focus on our strategy of deep, intensive, quiet diplomacy, have conversations, not call out our partners and allies, and do our engagements through one-on-one conversations. We certainly think that had an impact. Now, of course, we also were watching closely and we're in touch with them closely about their military successes, and certainly that was a factor, but a part of the discussion as well.
And sort of a scheduling question here. There had been an expectation that there was going to be a conversation of some kind today between Republicans on the Hill, some officials here at the White House about the status of infrastructure and Republican counterproposal. Is that meeting still happening today? And can you give us kind of an update on where things stand and any movement that may or may not be happening?
Sure. It is happening. It may be ongoing as we speak, but it started shortly before 1 o'clock over video conference this afternoon. Our team, including Steve Ricchetti, Louisa Terrell, Brian Deese, Secretary Raimondo, and Secretary Buttigieg, put forward a reasonable counteroffer that reduces the size of the package from $2.25 trillion in additional investment to $1.7 trillion. And in our view, this is the art, I should say, of seeking common ground. This proposal exhibits a willingness to come down in size, giving on some areas that are important to the president, otherwise they wouldn't have been in the proposal, while also staying firm in areas that are most vital to rebuilding our infrastructure and industries of the future, making our workforce and our country more competitive with China. We actually have every intention to share the complete totality of the counterproposal with you all. We'll just wait for the meeting to conclude to do that.
Until then, can you say any more about what was taken out to lower that price tag?
Sure. Let me give you kind of some top-line details, and then again, what the counterproposal that we'll put out is very detailed, so you'll see all the specifics for yourself. But again, I noted the top-line number that was offered. Our proposal also involved shifting investments in research and development, supply chains, manufacturing, and small business out of the negotiation into other efforts, such as the Endless Frontiers Act and the CHIPS Act, which, as you know, there's ongoing discussions and negotiations on a bipartisan level about those as well. The proposal also agreed to reduce the funding request for broadband to match the Republican offer, and to reduce the proposed investment in roads, bridges, and major projects to come closer to the number proposed by the senators. This is all in the spirit of finding common ground. Now, at the same time, as I alluded to, the counteroffer also reflects our view that the Republican offer excludes entirely some proposals that are key to our competitiveness, key to investments in clean energy and in industries of the future, and rebuilding our workforce, including critical investments in our power sector, building and construction, workforce training, veterans hospital construction, and the care economy. So we push for increased funding levels for critical transportation infrastructure like rail, especially considering China's level of investment in such projects, as well as the elimination of lead pipes that poison drinking water, and resilience projects as extreme weather events, as we've seen around the country, continue to become more common as a result of climate change.
And lastly, any changes to how you would like to pay for all of this?
We also reiterated, or the intention is to reiterate, the fact that the president is not willing to raise taxes on Americans earning under $400,000 a year through a gas tax or through user fees. He believes that the extraordinarily wealthy, that companies that many of whom have not paid taxes in recent years can afford a modest increase to pay for middle-class jobs. Do you have another question? Are you good? Okay, go ahead.
Just heard you describe the infrastructure negotiations as the art of seeking common ground. At some point, does that become the art of the deal?
I don't know. You're the professional here, Peter. You're the TV star, you know? What's the Fox Chiron going to be?
Art of seeking common ground does take a lot of characters.
It does.
So I'll check
does.
with the control room.
The art of the deal. We'd be okay with that. Yeah.
With the art of the deal, I think that's a headline.
Well, there you go. An art of a different kind of deal. A deal for the working people.
Got it.
Okay, go ahead.
So
Glad we could work that out.
Thank you very much. On Israel, how much credit does President Biden think he deserves for this ceasefire that was negotiated by the president of Egypt?
Well, first of all, the president's focus was on one objective, which was bringing an end to the conflict as quickly as possible. As you know, and as our briefing day in and day out was evidence of, there was criticism, and as Darlene's question was evidence of, there was criticism coming from many sides. We kept our head down, focused on our strategic objective, focused on intensive, quiet diplomacy to bring an end to the conflict as quickly as possible. Our engagements with the leaders of Egypt, the leader of Egypt was a key part of that discussion and a key part of bringing an end to the conflict, given their important relationships with Hamas.
And I know, because we are just trying to understand all these, the dozens of calls and who played what role.
Mm-hmm.
The president extended his sincere gratitude to President al-Sisi and the other senior Egyptian officials who played a critical role in the diplomacy. So if their role was critical, how does the White House describe President Biden's role?
Well, again, Peter, I think what I can do here, what the president was conveying is that this was an effort, much of it coordinated by the United States, much of which he was involved in personally, engagements on the phone, engagements with his team, a commitment and a driving desire to keep the strategy aligned with what we knew would help bring an end to the conflict as quickly as possible. He's also someone who wants to give credit where credit is due, and that includes the role the Egyptians played and the role many countries in the region played in working to bring an end to the conflict.
And then quickly,
and also his team. I mean, he called out Secretary of State Tony Blinken, he called out his National Security Advisor, and also our UN Ambassador Linda Thomas-Greenfield, who played an important role here as well.
Quickly on immigration, the governor of Tennessee says that he was asked and he declined a Biden administration request to house unaccompanied minors. And in coming days or in recent days, there have been some reports that at least 4 planes filled with unaccompanied minors landed in his state, some in the middle of the night. Can you explain what's going on there?
Well, as we have been very clear about, children, our objective is to unite these unaccompanied children under the age of 18, with families, with sponsor families, so children have been traveling through Tennessee. They are simply on their way to unite with relatives and sponsors, to meet sponsors in the state, or just traveling through Tennessee until they reach another destination to unite with family members or legal sponsors. As you know, geographically, it's right in a place where there's a lot of states around it, so it's a place where some flights have gone through as children are moving to other destinations.
And since this was something that the governor of the state said he didn't want, this is not a case of federal officials trying to sneak something past the state level officials.
I think I'm confirming here that Tennessee is a state that is right near in the middle of the country, and some kids have to travel through there to get through their destination, and we've been very clear that our objective is to treat these kids humanely, get them to safe homes, especially homes of loved ones and sponsored families. Go ahead.
Point of clarification, you mentioned detailed some of the cuts to the counter proposal. Did I hear you right that said they're going to find a home in other Senate legislation that's curling through now, like the China bill? So while they're coming out of your counter proposal, they are going to find a home somewhere
There
else.
are some components, where there is some overlap in the Frontiers bill and the CHIPS bill, where there is opportunity to still move forward on some of the president's ideas.
Gotcha. Republican governors in some 22 states have rolled back those expanded unemployment benefits. What is the White House or the Biden administration doing to preserve those benefits, if anything, at the state level?
Well, Jarrett, it is up to, of course, these governors to make a decision about what assistance they want to provide to the people of their states. Our view continues to be that unemployment insurance, of course, at a federal level, which is something we advocate for and would work to pass through Congress or have worked to pass through Congress, is something that can help people during a time where there are still more than 8 million people out of work make ends meet. And that there is not